Welcome to Extraordinary Council Meeting 455A of Hunters Hill Council. Can I ask you all to please be upstanding? I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on land and waters of Hunters Hill, and Council pays our respects to Elders past, present and emerging. We are joined today, well, we're not joined today by any of the local clergy like we would be in a general council meeting, so the Deputy Mayor will conduct the prayer.
We thank you, Lord, for the honour of being called by our fellow citizens to this office of honour and trust. Give us grace, diligently and honourably, free from private interest or prejudice, to discharge the duties entrusted to us, to the common good, and as in your sight, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Please be seated. The proceedings of all council meetings in open session, including all debate and addresses by the public, are recorded and webcast live on Council's website for the purpose of facilitating community access. Webcast archives are stored and available to the public on Council's website. The recordings may be disclosed under the provisions of the Government Information Public Access Act of 2009, the GIPA Act. Members of the public attending a council meeting may have their image, voice and personal information, including their name and address, recorded, publicly broadcast, and members of the public consent to this use of their image, voice and personal information. Councillors, we have no apologies. We have Councillor Tanous Sleeman, who will be slightly late, unfortunately, but she'll be joining us shortly, I am told. We don't have any confirmations of the minutes of previous meetings. We have one item to deal with today, item 8.1, Baysville Master Planning Proposal and Development Control Plan. Oh, sorry, councillors, is there any declarations of interest? No? Councillor Williams?
I'd like to move a motion in relation to item 8.1.
We have speakers to the item 8.1, councillor.
Okay. I'll
number of speakers.
my opportunity to
Yep. Councillors, we are at item 8.1. So we have a number of speakers this evening. First speaker is Nina Ardle. Thank you, Nina. You have 2 minutes. I just might. Sorry, you have 3 minutes. Sorry to cut one out there. So just noting that there are a number of speakers to this evening's meeting, I would just ask that if there are comments that any of the speakers going to make that have been covered in previous iterations, that we could maybe try and limit those to new items, because we've got to cover as much as we can, but new items if possible. So Nina, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, councillors, my name is Nina Ardle and I'm representing Gladesville Residents for Responsible Development. As you will be aware, our objection to the proposed development is that it is too big and too tall. Nearly all the other problems with this development arise from that. The summary of the community feedback in the submissions outcome report demonstrates that the wider community also opposes the development on these grounds. 674 people took the time to write a submission, 94% of which were objections or support with conditions. The conditions generally being a smaller scale development. Only 6% supported the development. But you know all this. What you may not know is that during the public exhibition period, our group were out talking to local residents. We spoke to a broad cross-section of people outside Gladesville Shopping Centre and various other locations. We had several hundred conversations. You may think that you can write off the people who wrote submissions as the noisy minority, as you suggested to us in our meeting, Mayor. But I can tell you that that is not the impression that we got at all.
Sorry, Nina, I don't think I ever inferred that in our meeting.
John, you were there.
Sorry, just to clarify, I think I said that councillors had to govern for all of the electorate.
No, you said that people who write submissions, not necessarily represented the general community, and that people who didn't write submissions.
Nina, I would suggest.
You then said the people that don't write submissions think other things, and I said you don't know what they think.
I would suggest that you stick to the item that we're discussing.
Okay, well, there were 2 people in this room that heard you say that. Okay, so we had several conversations, several hundred conversations. So the impression we got, the responses of the majority of the people that we spoke to ranged from resigned disappointment to outrage. The most important outtakes from our conversations were these. Firstly, Council's communication to residents about this project has been completely inadequate. The majority of people did not know about the development or had only heard about it via posts on the Love Gladesville Facebook page or the flyer that we delivered to their letterbox. Many who had heard something thought it was a state significant development instigated by the developer and were shocked to find out that it was a council-led plan. That then led to a lot of anger directed at council for not listening to the community after the last round of consultation. Admittedly, a small minority of people took a quick glance at our flyer and said something like, "Great, more housing, we need that," but didn't seem particularly interested in finding out any more detail beyond that. But what really saddened us was the number of people who, when we suggested writing a submission to register their objections, said something like, "Why bother? It's already a done deal." Or, "What's the point? Council never listen." Our conversations with this random sample of residents confirm that the submission summary is a good representation of the concerns of the broader community, not a noisy minority. They want redevelopment of this site, but not with this density and
Sorry,
height.
Nina, I'll just ask for a movement of extension of time. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Prieston. All those in favour, against, that is carried.
Thank you. So, has council acted on the community's major concerns? Have they investigated lower height options as promised? The report models just one option of 6 to 10 story development, which of course doesn't deliver enough floor space ratio to make it economically viable. This response is not only totally inadequate, it demonstrates a level of contempt for the community's concerns. Why hasn't council investigated other reasonable options, such as 15 stories with slightly smaller open spaces? You have always presented your plan as all or nothing and never presented the community with other viable options to consider. In conclusion, we once again urge you to act on the community's concerns and go back and properly investigate lower height options and fix the other flaws in this proposal that I'm sure others will point out. This is not just about getting the job done, it's about getting it done right. Councillors, those of you who vote to progress this proposal in its current form tonight will once again be ignoring the majority of the community who elected you to represent and advocate for them. You will be representing just 6%. That is not democracy. Thank you.
Nina, sorry. Nina, could I just ask that you sit at the left turn there for a moment? Councillors, any questions? Yes, Councillor Vergara.
Assume that 15 stories won't ever happen. It's not.
We already have, pretty much.
No, assume it's not feasible. Like no
Oh, right.
evidence. Assume that. So if the options are nothing, like let that site degrade.
Why do I have to assume that 15 stories is not possible? Because
Right,
nobody's
Nina,
ever
Nina, could
investigated
you
it.
just let the councillor finish their line of
I'll ask the gentleman a
thought.
question about that, but assume, because that's my understanding that it just could happen. Do you want nothing? And I'm happy to vote for nothing or 19 stories.
Okay, you keep saying that's what I'm saying. You're saying it's all or nothing, and it's not, because you've never investigated other viable options that we might be able to consider. Nobody wants nothing. Nobody. We all want, and everyone, our community conversations with the community, everybody wants something done. And quite a few people say, just do anything because this is terrible. Okay, it's the same with oh, great, there's more housing. And so those people will accept whatever you give them, as long as there's some housing in it. But these people and the majority of the community want something better. Not just something, we want something better. This is our town centre. It's really, really important site, and we want it to be great, not just done.
But better than what?
Better than the council's proposal, because the community wants something smaller.
Another question.
Yes,
So
councillor.
if it's a site that's just full of housing buildings, kind of like it was put in 2015, so those three big, so low, flat and wide,
Yes, I remember it.
whole site, yeah. Would you want that and no other?
No, because that's not the only alternative. We haven't investigated anything. And there's now a problem with, you've made the site smaller for Third Eye to make it the bit that they actually own, right? But you haven't reduced the open space. So how on earth are they going to deliver that open space without the towers being even taller now?
So you would have less open, you're happy to have less open space and reduce height?
I personally would, but I don't know what the rest of the community think because they haven't been asked. If it's well-designed open space with smaller towers and it's a bit smaller open space, that might be a much better outcome, yes.
Can I ask a general manager question?
Yes.
General manager, in terms of the options for lower heights, what steps were taken by council to consider lower height options?
Director of Planning Infrastructure.
Yeah, sure. So as you know, councillor, I have been here just for 3 months, and in that time I have done a deep dive into all the documentation and looked at this in detail. In reviewing the documentation, since 2013, there's been a number of options being put to council, being put to the community. It's ranged from 8 stories to 10 stories to 15 stories in 2021. It's now 19 stories. In the brief time that I was here, we've now done another test at 10 stories, noting that a lot of the feedback was the Lane Cove canopy was to be the ideal for delivery for open space and for community, for high amenity. So the test for 10 stories was around still having access to a quantity of open space. But the problem that happens is the lower it goes, the wider it gets, even with open space in between buildings to still try and meet ADG requirements or apartment design guide requirements. Those spaces become quite privatised and they don't become community spaces. And so that's where we got to with those tests.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Lane.
While we're talking about 15 stories, did you get an impression about people's feeling on 15 stories?
Well, people remembered the last round of consultation where 15 stories was the preferred option out of what was proposed, but that was still too tall. And a lot of people, I said, remembered that from last time and were flabbergasted. How can, I mean, I know people don't always understand the planning process, but the number of people who were really disappointed and couldn't understand why council were now proposing something taller, because they haven't been taken on the journey. And council promised to consult with the community before, after that last round, and they have not consulted us in preparing this plan. So yeah, people understand what's happened and they remember. Yeah.
Councillors, any further questions? If not, thank you, Anna. Our second speaker is Richard Lee. Thanks, Richard.
Thank
You have
you.
3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. I live and represent the 10 owners of 3 to 15 Massey Street. So the 10 lots, the 1 block on the northeastern boundary of the key site. Now, to be very clear, we're not here to oppose this master plan. We want Gladesville's renewal to succeed. And we thank you, council, for retaining the mixed use on our land. But the plan has been finalised around us and not with us, and the reasons that's been given doesn't really stack up. If you consider the whole block, the key site has been offered a 4.1 FSR, 41 FSR and 19 stories. Our lots in the same block, 2.5 to 1 FSR and maybe 6 to 7 stories. All the significant uplift is in the focus in the one key area. And that misses, in our perspective, a better solution. Include our site and the same massing spreads across the whole block. Lower heights, less shadow, gentler transitions. The Department of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure said exactly that, a gateway, but this has never been properly tested. Now, the reasons given, your report says 41 is unlikely to be supported because our lots weren't part of the original exhibition. Councillors, we didn't take that at face value. We reached out to the department directly. And what they've provided to us is they're not against the uplift that Collier's put forward to you. They're simply required to be re-exhibited. And critically, we don't believe this requires re-exhibiting the whole planning proposal, only the Massey Street lots. So the barrier is not the department, it's not the owners, not the community. The only standing thing between this and having properly tested our submission is council limiting the next step of re-exhibiting what we've been putting forward for the Massey Street lots. Now, your evidence says that this step is worth taking. Now, Hill PDA, your consultant, said that anything roughly below 4 to 1 isn't viable as a development solution. You concede that a new 2.5 to 1 will deliver approximately the same yield as a scheme that admittedly won't be built. Now, a maximum height of 24 meters, a 2-meter increase, and an additional 0.3 FSR probably ends up just simply sterilizing the land. Now, the community loses as well. Now, our scheme gave land back. We gave an additional 815 square meters of public space to make that plaza larger on the Massey Street site. wider pedestrian links, and wider carriageways on Massey Street and Flagstaff, hoping to improve traffic flows, and potentially shop fronts instead of just blank walls. Refuse uplift, and you also lose some of these public benefits. Now, we are just 10 families who own and live on that street. When this construction starts, it's going to be 19 stories that will be right behind our bedrooms, cranes over our roofs, trucks past our doors. Now, we accepted it because we believe it'd be part.
Sorry, Richard. It's extension of time. Moved Councillor Priest and seconded Councillor Williams. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Thank you.
No problem. We believe it'd be part of the renewal and not just next to it. Now, our ask tonight is pretty modest, and this is what we want to leave with you. As part of the final process, resolve to re-exhibit the uplift set out in the Collier submission for the Massey Street lots, and just those lots, and let the department and the community test it properly. The master plan, if you want, can proceed untouched. Nothing is delayed but us. And we're asking for it. We believe fairness demands it, and the department will allow it. It's council that can do it. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. If you could just stay there for a moment. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Vicara.
Yeah.
You can help me understand. I'm just going to, because I read everything, but I just want to get your perspective. So what you're saying is those 3 to 15
Yep.
get incorporated into the site.
Yep.
Under your proposal, with that wider site, what are the proposed building heights and FSRs for the whole site?
Well, we were initially just submitting just the same requirements that you guys are asking for or granting the key site in order to be able to move the load across the whole site.
You're not proposing any lower building height or FSR with the incorporation?
Not necessarily, no. But in our submission from Colliers, we put something forward. We engage them. We spend money out of our own pockets in order to engage a professional planning firm to do that. So they proposed something which actually granted and gave back some more public benefit.
Yes, so more public benefit, same height, same FSR, more public benefit.
Yeah, then it's up to whoever wants to develop the entire thing to move massing across the entire site according to what they think is most appropriate.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Lane.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to first clarify that point. I'm just bringing up your submission. I believe it was 15 stories on your
It was
site?
in our submission, yeah.
Yeah, so while you didn't make comments on the remainder of the site because you don't want to get in its way, you're looking at the FSR for the site, 4:1, delivering 15 stories on your site.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
okay.
the Colliers submission.
Yeah,
part of my house,
so
yes.
again, consistent with previous work, 15 stories delivers you that amount. And like you said, that also delivers substantial public open space and through site links.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing was, I actually queried why your site wasn't included when we looked at this in February. I said it was kind of a non-compete that we had carved it out. And I was told that, oh, well, look, these are strata, they're not going to move anywhere, etc. Were you ever contacted or engaged by council?
We had some initial discussions with the mayor. We did speak and try to reach out to Third Eye, but they have been very forthcoming in discussions to us.
No, I
But-
meant more in the process of considering what the key site boundaries were. Did council
Formally
whether or not
approach
you
us?
were- Well, just whether or not you're amenable to development.
It was quite late in the piece, probably only more recently in the past
Okay.
few months that we've
And
been
then,
speaking.
Great, but it sounds like you've now formed a
Group, yes.
group, and you are amenable to developing that site.
We are amendable, and we are acting as one group, yes.
Okay, so we have been proceeding up until very recently under the mistaken impression that you weren't amenable to development, and you are amenable to the development, and you've gone and you've engaged Colliers, one of the
Yep.
eminent advisors in this area, and they have established a 4:1 and 15 stories works on your site.
Yes.
But we made no consideration of this until you made your submissions.
Until now.
Okay.
And so now that we've seen the final report, hence our proposal back to you is, well, can you please consider that in full, given that we believe it's a professionally created town planning proposal.
And obviously this has been around for a long time, and you would have been around for the 2021 exhibition.
I was around for the 2021 exhibition and also the previous exhibitions as well, yes.
And were comments made about your site in relation to the 2021 exhibition?
Oh, golly, that's testing my memory now. I think we've raised it in previous discussions, but I don't think we've ever been taken seriously. And I don't think we.
My council
Yeah.
was aware since 2021 that you were part of the potential Batesville master plan development.
I presume so,
But you weren't included in
but we haven't been
discussions.
included in our discussions.
Thank you.
Councillor Prieston, have you got a question?
Can I ask a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director?
I might be able to give some context. Richard has been involved for a long time. I think you went back to the 2016 iteration of Gladesville, the last major planning proposal. And I've also never quite understood exactly why that block wasn't included. I actually asked the director of the day why, and that they took the view at the time, which I disagreed with, that those blocks would be too difficult to amalgamate into a single coherent form. But I take your submission seriously, and I actually think we need to solve for that, because I don't think it's good land use planning to have a cutout on the corner. But yeah, there's a bit of history to that, but it was the view of the planners of the day, because I did ask the question, that they didn't think that that site would amalgamate. And now that we've been through the process, I think that council is taking it seriously, and you've met with the planning staff and the general manager about this, but that it does have planning merit, obviously, to massage heights and densities around the key site. Councillor Prieston, you did have a question?
That's clarified it.
Yeah, I thought that it might. Councillors, any further questions of Richard? Councillor Kassab.
Give it to you. I just want to just clarify and just make sure that we've understood correctly. So you guys are looking at 15 stories on your site, so that Massey Street, obviously that's for the 3 to 15, and then 19 stories on the
key site is what's been proposed. Yeah. Look, I mean, we put in a submission solely on our site. That's the brief that we gave to colleagues, because we've been excluded as part of the planning process. So we need to engage them to say, well, what can be viable and what gives back public benefit, and that's what they provided. But yeah, ultimately, what goes ahead is up to whoever ends up taking over the land.
Councillors, any other questions of Richard? Not. Thank you. Thanks, Richard. Our next speaker is Lewis Astridge. Sorry, I could have spread those out a bit better, but
yeah, no, all good.
Thanks, Lewis. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. And sorry, my notes are a little bit rough. I haven't had time to rehearse this or anything, so it's going to be a little bit raw. But yeah, my name is Lewis Astridge, and I am also one of the owners, or one of the 10 owners of 3 to 15 Massey Street. I must admit, I'm not really looking forward to 5 years of waking up to jackhammers and diggers every morning, leaning over a giant cavern where my backyard used to be, or seeing my view of the Harbour Bridge being replaced by an overshadowing tower of balconies with people's washing lines. But with that said, I'm actually in favour of this development. I think it's great you guys are doing this. And I also understand that, you need to kind of move things forward. So I'm with you on that. Though I should just add, however, that the public concerns that have been raised do have some merit. We suggested in our submission that our row of 10 houses on Massey Street, who are unified in their interest in making that land available, can solve some of the biggest concerns that were raised in the last public exhibition. I mean, for example, there's a huge concern about the tower height. I mean, we believe our lands, if you just shave the top off the tower, you could just plonk that on our lands. You can still keep the number of apartments you want, but you solve the problem of the height. Bingo, done. There's also the issue of traffic flow. You've got Massey Street, which is a single lane. That's going to cause all sorts of chaos with all those people there. If you use the land that we have, you can extend that road into 2 lanes instead of 1. So now you've got 2 lanes of traffic going in there, which will hugely solve the traffic concerns that people have. You could also put in yet another residential and visitor entrance and exit driveway. So instead of just having Flagstaff and Cal, you can also add Massey Street to that, particularly if you've got 2 lanes from there. So that will also ease traffic in and out and on the streets as well. You can also put in additional underground parking beneath our lot, which would be a multi-level scenario, because we're at the highest point of that road, and that will add hundreds of additional parking spots as well. So that'll solve some parking issues too. Not to mention the aesthetics that get improved. I mean, our places are like some aged 90s cream and green colored property. And now you could upgrade that to something that's in alignment with what you're trying to build. And also the amenities that come with it. Like you're looking at a prime corner of that block right there. You could put in shop fronts, cafes, open areas where people can walk around with their kids, and still have the apartment blocks on top. So you have a lower one on the street level and the taller one behind it. So essentially, our submission, we had everything laid out in the town planning documents that Richard raised. But yeah, it was cast aside in the explanation that it would require re-exhibiting to the public. So understanding this, it does take effort. I get it. It's a lot of extra effort to do all that again after you feel like you've been through that already. But we just believe that, with the amount of benefits that this
Sorry,
offers.
Lewis. Move extension of time. Move Councillor Kassab, second to Councillor Williams. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We just believe with the amount of benefits this can possibly present to you, all of you, that will help solve so many of these problems, that is it not worth, maybe re-exhibiting and just taking a look at this. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lewis. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Vergara.
I think there's huge merit in what you and Richard have proposed. So I'm interested to debate that. But one thing I wanted to, and I do think that incorporating that site would solve a lot of the problems, but let's talk about the height problem. As you said, the owner can acquire this site, chop off the top and put it there. The economic feasibility, one of the costs which work out the feasibility is the land costs. If the current cost requires 19 stories, how can they just then pay more for the Massey Street sites and then reduce heights? Doesn't make sense to me, but maybe I'm missing something.
It's probably more of a planning question, Councillor, than a. Yeah. I mean, it's
pay more and then get the same amount.
Well, you wouldn't, because your square meterage would increase to the tune of the same FSR control in what I understand is being proposed. So that the 4:1 would apply to the entire site. It would be about. I use the analogy that you're squeezing a toothpaste tube. It's half empty, and you sort of.
Do you get more apartments?
You would get more apartments if you bought that block, if that was the developer's wish. In the assumption that the submissions by Lewis and Richard were accepted by council.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yep.
Yes.
To be fair to your point, there is certainly cost associated with it that comes with basically evicting us from our spot. We think that in the long run that's going to be a really good investment as well for whoever that purchaser is. I mean, yeah, it might be more costly up front, but the timely investment of that spot in that prime area, it'll get made up for in no time.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Priest.
Maybe just a quick one.
Yes.
Thank you for your time. You mentioned shaving the top off the towers in theory and positioning that bulk onto, in theory, the sites on Massey. What tower height are you in favour of in the key site area?
Look, I mean, it'd be really up to whoever needs it ultimately. But I think in order to make the area viable, we'd be looking at a 4:1 ourselves. So whatever that height ends up being is what it ends up being. But I think that's the way that makes it economically viable in terms of making a circular thing go ahead. That makes sense.
Yep. Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions? If not, thanks, Lewis.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate your time. Our next speaker is Daniel Papalo. Daniel. Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, councillors, and thank you for your service. I'd like to start by just saying thank you overall. It's been a very interesting process. I stood here many months ago and raised an objection to the proposal. And since then, with Nina and some of our other neighbours, we've met literally dozens, maybe even hundreds of our neighbours in a way that we wouldn't have done. The results of that are before you, so you've got very clear feedback from the community. But I recognise you guys must be exhausted with this subject. The amount of paper that's been printed and the amount of documentation that's been produced is unbelievable. But I think what's clear is that we aren't yet at a point where the proposal that you guys are considering meets the community's expectations. So the feedback was extensive, it's very clear, and it's momentous in a way for so many people to actually take the time to provide that feedback. I know Nina mentioned that there is a degree of pessimism in the community. They want to see that feedback responded to. That's really difficult when the proposals that you have before you are all or nothing. And Councillor, your question, I think, goes right to the heart of the matter. Do you want 19 stories or nothing? And I think there should be a really clear idea of what the answer is. It's nothing for the time being, and until you get a proposal that actually meets communities' needs. So once you build 19 stories, you're done. That's it. You cannot correct that mistake. And actually that creates a precedent for the rest of the area that creates more misfortune down the track. If you do nothing, you don't have to do nothing forever. You just have to do nothing until you get a good enough plan that you can go ahead with. So my request to council is really just take the time, accept that you aren't there yet. We have a clear feedback from the community that they want to develop the site. I'm in favour, my neighbours are in favour of developing the site, but it is finding something that achieves a balance. I'm an accountant. When you talk about economic viability and feasibility, I understand what that means. It isn't black and white though. So it's not that this site has to be 19 stories. It's that the current assumptions and the current framework in which you framed it mean that it has to be 19 stories. There are a lot of other variables that are in play here, and I really encourage council to take the time to investigate those alternatives and find something that better meets the community's needs, but recognising that you guys must be exhausted and that this has taken years to get to this stage, but we aren't there yet. And I think that's the key message that's come out of what we've seen so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Is there any question? Councillor McGowan.
I'm really trying to grapple with this. Like I've read the papers, I've read the 1,000 documents, and I'm not decided. Like I've come here really today to listen to, so that's why I'm asking questions. I don't think this is a situation of nothing or 19 necessarily. What I'm hugely concerned about is that this is council does nothing or takes its time to do something that you think delivers community benefit, and the owner can put in a planning proposal through the state-led pathway that gets you 25, 27 towers. So, and this is not, talk about precedent, that's not unprecedented. We had the Montefiore site where council refused their planning proposal. They just bypassed council and they're getting what they want without giving us any community benefit. So I am trying to balance that. I'm trying to balance what will give the community some benefit, right? So to me, it's not 19 or nothing. It's nothing or 19 or 27.
So can I give you
I'm
two?
trying to, you understand how I'm trying to,
Yeah,
trying
absolutely.
to balance that?
Can I give you two key points in response to that? So you have hundreds of community members that have been mobilised on this issue. So whether they're representing to you or to state parliament on these issues, it's the same. So the feedback's very clear. Now that remains a risk, but I don't think that's a reason to vote for a plan that doesn't actually meet the community's needs. So the goal of council here is to represent the community. The best thing you can do is get the best possible plan that meets the community's needs. And I think having gone through that community consultation process, there's real value there. Like the feedback from the community is crystal clear. The other point is that we do have a precedent for development that is going through the state significant process right now. It's the Fabcot Woolworths proposal. It's 14 stories. It's not 27 stories. And so if we're looking at orders of magnitude, the one precedent that we have, it's literally across the road, is 14 stories. And I think where we are right now, most people would regard that as a better alternative than the current 19-story plus potential additional height for affordable housing option.
And just go back to the community event. Everyone wants the site to be renewed. The 19 stories proposal does that. Everyone wants public benefit, open spaces. The current proposal does that. So it's not like it doesn't deliver community benefit. If it didn't deliver any community benefit, this would be a no-brainer. This would be a clear no. But it does, right? In some way. Not doesn't give you everything, the community, everything they want, but there is some community benefit.
Like I said, I'm an accountant. I live in the world of trade-offs. There is not enough community benefit to justify 19 stories. And so if the trade-off, it's very simple, right? You can't have 19 stories and have quite as much community space. Okay, there's going to be less community space. You can make use of that community space in better ways. It doesn't need to be bigger, it just needs to be better.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a matter of balance, and same way that you're saying to me, it's not 19 or nothing. I just want people to recognise that it's a balance of, is there community benefit and outweigh the risks, the opportunity costs, and the adverse impacts of a development. That's what I'm trying to weigh up.
Councillor Lane.
Thank you. Thank you for your detailed discussion. I think it's interesting you pointed out FABCOT. I agree with you. Having worked at the state government, we look at the surrounding area, and 14 is probably pushing it a little bit, but you know that's you can't get 27 from 12, but you can incrementally get 30% more from affordable housing, and then once you've got your approval, you can then go to the HDA and get a little bit more, and so you can get 27 from 19. But my question was actually just in relation to that public benefit. We've heard a few times this idea that the thing that we're holding constant is the 4,000 square metres of public open space. And that's informed by Lane Cove. Lane Cove has roughly 5,000 square metres of public open space. Thing is, if you dig into it, Lane Cove is about 3,000 in, there's an 1,800 park, and then there's two 800 square metre hardscape, and then the stage. It's about, you know, did you get feedback from people on, you know, I'm really looking forward to that public open space. This is the community benefit that I want. You know, any sort of in the round discussion about what we're giving up in exchange for it. Or, you know, I heard Nina talked about, well, we're looking for a better outcome in terms of the site itself. So I guess we're calling that a community benefit now. But any other community benefits that you heard feedback on?
Yeah, like I think everyone would like to see an improved site. Like no one's desperate to keep the current site in its current form. There's not a lot of community benefit there. I didn't
Beyond
hear
redevelopment, did you hear about people talking about open space or talking?
No one is saying thank goodness for the 4,000 square metres.
Right. Yeah, that was the impression.
That's not an important number. The height of the towers, I didn't hear anyone bring it up.
Yeah.
And I again, like I'm very familiar with the site at Lane Cove. If you asked people whether they counted the access laneway as community benefit, they'd kind of laugh.
Yeah.
You're not going to sit there with your deck chair.
Yeah.
So it's also worth pointing out that one of the reasons we all live in this area is because there are some great open spaces already.
Yeah.
So adding more space is not really the problem that we're here to solve.
Yeah.
You know, if you want green space, there's loads of green space, and we don't need an apartment development to deliver that at the cost of higher towers.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's a great trade-off.
Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I was just wondering, that term of the Lane Cove site, do you think that is equivalent to what's being proposed here? Over there, there's no towers leaning over the top of the park.
Yep.
It is a park in its truest sense, fully bathed in sunlight. Do you think this can be what's being proposed here can be equated to name of the place?
Canopy. I don't think so. I'm not a planner. Like I said, I'm an accountant. But the certainly the one thing you can point to with the canopy is it's a damn sight better than what it replaced, which was a really awful car park. Now we've got a really awful shopping centre, kind of does the job, but like you're not looking necessarily to replicate the canopy. I don't think that should be the goal here. But if you ask people to look for examples of really great like community benefit projects around Sydney, there's not very many to choose from. So that's part of the problem when you're looking for precedents for great outcomes here. There's just not very many. And so the canopy is kind of the obvious one to point to because you're really scratching around for examples. I wouldn't point to it and say that's great, that's what we want here. But it was solving for different problems. I'm not sure it's particularly relevant at all, to be honest.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions? You're not. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
Councillors, we have a written submission from Jim Sanderson, which the General Manager can read.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure I'll get through it in 3 minutes. This master planning process commenced in March 2018 with the unanimous resolution of council to develop an overarching vision for development of the Gladesville precinct. Initially, the master plan included 3 blocks that incorporated the entire Victoria Road street frontage from Pittwater Road in the north to Junction in the south. In 2020, most were relieved to see the refusal of the then proponent-led GSV planning proposal for reasons including traffic and transport impacts, and need to set a clear vision that will allow for revitalisation of the centre and resolve issues of access, heritage and built form. This refusal allowed the GSV site to be added to a council-led proposal which could consider the broader Gladesville precinct and continue the considerable community consultation and involvement. Indeed, the justification for the very significant expenditure of ratepayer funds was that a council-led proposal should always deliver a far better community outcome than any proponent-led proposal ever could. On October 18, 2021, these principles were reflected in another unanimous resolution of the outgoing council. Sadly, since this time, instead of council continuing to consult and involve the community was largely shut out of the process for about 4.5 years until on 11th of March 2026 public exhibition of the current proposal commenced. Rather than the community feedback resulting in further work being undertaken for consideration by council, it is now proposed to reduce open space and increase building heights, the antithesis of what community feedback expressly desired. Narrowing the scope to include little more than the GSV site wastefully discards the extraordinary resources that went into early work on the proposal. At the same time, it bans the rest of the Gladesville precinct and the protection of its heritage and built form. Building heights and their impacts have always been contentious. We are expected to believe that the arrangement of built forms and the so-called slender tower proportions ensure winter shadows are fast moving, when in fact proper interpretation of the shadow diagrams at figures 56 and 57 of the planning proposal show that between 9 AM and 3 PM of the winter solstice, little if any direct sunlight will pass between the tower buildings as proposed in these diagrams. At these times the proposed house will act as a single block when it comes to casting shadows. The planning proposal cannot ensure delivery of even this inadequate outcome, as it is noted that the proposed LEP clause 6.113 will permit building heights up to 70 metres subject to other controls anywhere in Area A, which covers the entire planning proposal site. Building heights must be implemented in the LEP height of buildings maps as they usually are, as this could confine building heights and would permit towers to areas of the site where towers would have acceptable impacts. The height of building maps should also specify a maximum building height of 9 metres for the entire Victoria Road frontage from Pittwater Road to Junction Street, with a setback of at least 5 metres to preserve the integrity of the Victoria Road above awning facades. This aligns with the advocacy of the statement of heritage impact, but implementing these building heights in the LEP provides a greater enforceability, a statutory instrument. Even if it is appropriate to spend ratepayers' funds on a planning proposal that delivers for the developer rather than the community, which is not, this proposal has too many flaws to allow its adoption.
Thank you, General Manager. Councillors, we have our next speaker, Melissa Neighbour. Thank you, Melissa. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Yes, my name is Melissa Neighbour. I'm a town planner with over 20 years of experience. I'm the director of Sky Planning, which is a small town planning firm. And I'm a lifelong resident in Drummoyne, having spent many years visiting this wonderful neighbouring local area for shopping, services and recreation. I'm also an aspiring homeowner, and I do look to the Gladesville area for maybe one day owning my own home for myself and my son. I'm also a strong housing advocate, and I'm here to tell you that the Sydney Yimby movement strongly supports this master plan. From a planning perspective, I personally support this master plan because it's exactly the right site for growth, an underutilised commercial site in the heart of an existing village centre on a major arterial corridor halfway between the Sydney and Parramatta CBDs, surrounded by shops, services, employment and public transport. And if we can't say yes to homes here, then we seriously need to ask ourselves, where are we prepared to say yes to? If you already own your own home, it's easy to see the housing crisis as someone else's problem. But for young people, renters, key workers and women sleeping in their cars, this isn't a policy debate, it's their everyday reality. Every LGA carries a responsibility to house a fair share of the next generation. Sydney doesn't have a housing problem in one suburb. It has a housing shortage across the entire city. And it's going to take homes of every kind in every place to fix it. We cannot keep saying, not in my backyard, or even worse in this case, not in my town centre. Women are sleeping in cars. There's different economic analysis that show that housing of every kind.
Members of the
increases-
gallery, sorry. All speakers this evening have been listened to quietly and with respect, and I expect that same cordiality to be presented to this speaker. So please do not feel the need to intervene.
But all of the yeses that this city needs to say, this one really is the easiest because this is renewal, not sprawl. We're not clearing bushland. We're not extending to the urban fringe. The most sustainable growth, the most climate friendly growth, the most healthy living and community oriented growth, the most economic and productive growth is up and up and up, not out. So here we're taking an aging, declining shopping centre, turning it into hundreds of new homes, real open space and a village centre with life in its street again. And I will just say that the public benefit here is in those towers. It's not just what you get, it's what this whole city gets, which is more homes. Will this proposal be perfect? No. No proposal ever is. I'm a town planner for 20 years. I've never seen a perfect proposal. Planning isn't about perfection. That's not what progress is about. It's about weighing up that public interest and asking not only what are the impacts, but what are the benefits? And who do we lock out and who suffers if we say no to more towers and higher density? This proposal, though, it does give us benefits, multiple ones, more homes, more customers for local businesses, more public space.
Melissa, moved extension of time. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Kassab. All those in favour? Against, that is carried unanimously. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. More investment, more people able to live close to jobs, families and opportunity. History won't judge us by how well we protected an ageing shopping centre. It will judge us by whether we have the courage to house the next generation and if we acted in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Lane.
Thank you. And I remember you speaking last time as well, and you were a great advocate for affordable housing in particular. I'll be moving something in relation to affordable in particular because we don't have any affordable component here at the moment. I did want to just ask you a couple of things from a town planning perspective because I think that's come up a couple of times. So the current proposal has depending on which document you look at, 12 to 15 metre setback to Flagstaff, but Flagstaff is part of the LMR reform, so it gets up to 6 stories. So in my view, it should be there shouldn't be a setback to Flagstaff to preserve a residential transition that won't transition. And I just wanted your opinion on that.
So I would say that, setbacks, depending, I mean, look, those nuances exactly in terms of setbacks and impacts, for me, it's not my preference to talk about because I can understand there are people here that might have differing views and might be impacted directly. I think we've heard from some of them. So my overall view is as long as privacy, solar access and those sort of things can be ameliorated or mitigated as much as possible, then setbacks should not be reduced. They should be, that we should be building out further is what I would say.
Yeah. And I suppose a broader question then, which is in your practice, it's a very unusual site, the Quay site, as you know, it sort of wraps around corners, and we've heard from the residents that were excluded that they've done that Collier's scheme. So,
which is great.
And I guess the question for me is, if we're doing a master plan, an area-based master plan, would your expectation be that we do an area-based master plan, so we consider the buildings as they go to the streets rather than, chopping and changing to a particular development? Because my concern is we're fitting we seem to be giving one developer a specific outcome rather than a strategic planning outcome. And as a strategic planner, I guess I'm just asking whether you see it the same way.
The way that I see it is that we need to act. And this has been going round and round for a long time. And I think the fact that there's an amazing opportunity to do something now that should be taken immediately.
Even if it sterilises the remaining lots?
I don't think it can isolate those lots. I think there'll still be development opportunity. It might not come in exactly the perfect form that everybody wants, but I don't think we're going to get to an outcome at all if we keep going round and round in circles. That's my personal opinion. I think we need to act, and I think there will be more opportunities that this will actually stimulate going forward.
Councillors, any other questions of Melissa? Councillor Williams.
Just wondering your opinion that on the other side of Victoria Road, on the southern side, there's been a large scale development of medium rise buildings, which would ultimately equate to the same, if not more, than what has been proposed on the Coon site that we're talking about tonight. So why do you think that type and that scale of development couldn't take place on the northern side?
As I understand it, that this feasibility doesn't stack up. We need that density and that height to be able to make the whole development feasible, if I'm correct. So that's why I think it needs to. And I actually think it should be higher. As I said, people are sleeping in cars, and my personal opinion is 19 is not that high. And I think the public benefit is in more homes for people.
Councillor Vergara, question.
So in the paper, there's something that concerned me, and I mentioned it in one of the other questions, which is that a private sector initiated planning proposal could lead to an application for heights 25, 27 stories. In your professional opinion, on this site, what are the chances of that getting through a state-led planning pathway?
I think the chances are high. I think the state government appetite for more development is only increasing. The consultation process that happens through the state is very different to what's happening here. I think the residents have an amazing opportunity and that they should really take that on board. I know that Homes New South Wales understand the wait list is hundreds of thousands of people for homes. The government is moving steadily towards looking at their own sites and putting as many homes on them as possible and as high as they can possibly build them so that those people can have homes. So that I believe that the appetite for the state government to look at a site like this will be very high.
Councillors, any further questions? Sorry, thank you, Melissa. Thank you. We have our next speaker, John Marlowe. Thank you, John. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
I just really want to talk about a specific issue, and that is traffic, which has sort of partly been forgotten about. And in my view, the current analysis or traffic impact analysis that's been done is somewhat superficial and essentially comes to the conclusions that, oh, she'll be right, nothing to worry about here. Well, I can tell you what, most of the people that I talk to, and I'm a resident in Junction Street, but Junction, Massey Street, that they just don't believe that, basically, and neither do I. The planning proposal regularly refers to council-adopted traffic demand measures, but for the life of me, I can't find what those traffic demand control measures are in any of the thousands of pages of documentation that are there. And they then reduce the amount of traffic that comes out of there because of the implementation of these traffic demand measures. But they're not spelled out anywhere. So how accurate is all of that information? There's little evidence of serious consideration being paid to alternative transport modes across the site, such as encouraging accessibility for pedestrians, bicycle, shared services, perhaps like even line bikes and line bicycles and scooters. I know there'll be people that don't want that, but it is a transport mechanism. The documentation refers to providing some parking locations, which is hardly a comprehensive traffic management plan that will reduce car travel. The traffic impact studies indicate an overall increase of AM vehicle movements of 22 in and 87 out per hour, and PM movements of 150 and 64 out, 150 in and 64 out in the PM per hour. I'm not sure over what period they call the peak, but I can be fairly sure and at the actual peak period between sort of 8 and 10, that there'll be a lot more traffic movement than that is, and I can imagine enormous congestion occurring accessing Victoria Road out of the Cowell Street. Now, there's in the documentation it talks about changing the light sequence for that. That'll cause further congestion in Victoria Road, and it will then force more people to rat run around the back of that the lights at Victoria on Pittwater Road and Victoria Road at the end of Massey Street and at the end of Cowell Street, the 3 sets of lights that go through there. And so they'll rat run as they already do from the roundabout up Venus Street, up Junction Street and up Bateman's Road. None of those roads are suitable. Significant increase in traffic.
John, it's move extension of time. Councillor Williams, second to Councillor Priest. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Thanks, John.
The third eye proposal at present, from what I can see, although it's not detailed, proposes that the traffic entrances in Cowell Street for the parking underneath the development. That means that there'll also be significant pressure for traffic to come off Venus, up Junction, down the southern end of Flagstaff Street, and then to turn left, that they're allowed to do at the end of Flagstaff Street to go into there. Again, not considered at all in any of the traffic planning. The roadway that goes through the middle, laneway, sorry, that goes through from Cowell Street to Junction Street, which is in the layout and the plan, doesn't show me any ability to provide vehicular access to any developments that happen in those sanitised building areas. So how the hell is that going to work? They have been sanitised, because how do they get in there? How do you get vehicular access into those areas? It doesn't make sense. No, there's been no consideration of, or no out-of-the-box thinking in the transport thing about what else could we do? Could we potentially improve traffic links with dedicated pathway for bikes and shared vehicles to get to the ferry? Or could we put more parking down there at the ferry so that people can use more of the ferry to take some of the transport pressures off this area? And the parking is ridiculous down there. A whole lot more people would use that Huntleys Point ferry if that was the case. So I would just say in these circumstances, I submit that she'll be right, nothing to worry about here is not adequate. And that whatever happens on the site, and I think I'm with everyone else here, and I just disagree a little with the lady that just stood up here before. None of us are saying nothing should happen here. All of us agree, and all of us agree that more housing is required. And housing is required, and there's a lot of housing that goes into this site. Whether we need to have 500 on the site is questionable. Whether we need to have the height on that site is questionable. Very much appreciate the submissions that have been made from Massey Street that they would solve it, and the submissions that have been made here that says reducing the amount of open space could allow something that might work better. But as far as the traffic is concerned, I would just submit that whatever happens, please, council, consider the community, consider us, and get us involved in talking about how those traffic issues can be better dealt with than what has been dealt with in the documentation to date. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions of John? Councillor McGarry.
So I have a question, but can I just seek clarification?
Yes.
So post the exhibition work, council did an updated traffic modelling, SIDRA intersection analysis, and an independent peer review of the traffic analysis for this planning process. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So the question is, even given the post-exhibition work, you still say the consideration of traffic is insufficient?
Absolutely. Junction Street is not being considered in any of that traffic planning at all. And it's a significant access way to the shopping centre at present. It's not the main way, don't get me wrong. Cowell Street is the main way. but it doesn't, you look for Junction Street in there, and the only thing that it mentions in all of that documentation about Junction Street, oh, we're going to put time parking in Junction Street and that'll solve. Well, I have no idea. As an example, the whole thing doesn't take into account the local traffic movement up Pittwater Road or Victoria Road because they're state roads. But the local roading in that area, traffic comes into there from, you know, from Ryde Road through to Victoria Road and down as far as, you know, needs consideration for traffic movement through all of that area because there's a lot of rat running going through it. I came through there the other day and Google Maps, I was going into the city. Google Maps directed me to turn at the roundabout, to go up Venus Street and go up Junction Street.
John, so I'm trying to get this right. So if you turn up Junction Street and you're going towards Victoria Road, are you saying that it's just people parking on there to go into the village centre, or are you saying that they're going there then turning left? Because you have to turn left at the back. At the end of
you know, you can only turn left, and you can only turn left from Bateman. But what they rat run around the back,
and then turn back into Cow,
and then turn back into Victoria Road because you missed 3 sets of lights getting up there.
Oh, I'm with you now. I'm
right.
I got you. Yeah.
They just
not to go to the centre though. That's the rat.
No,
to
go to the centre, they come up and then go down Flagstone Street. And you
had
get a whole lot of them that ignore the left, ignore the left-hand turn and go straight ahead anyway.
Yeah, that's a bigger issue on a lot of fronts in that part of the world.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's just one example, and I think Massey Street has similar sorts of issues.
Similar.
All of these very narrow streets, right? They're less than 6 metres wide, or you know, they're the width of the laneway that's proposed to go in to the development, which is 6 metres. These roads are not much more than 6 metres. They're not useful for traffic load, you know, increased traffic load.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Lane.
I just wanted to clarify a few things and get your feedback. So I don't know if you saw this, but in the CIDRA results, they did look at the cumulative effect of traffic. And the reason I mention this is, you know, you talked about the 22 in 87 out 150, but the qualification that they make in the report is that's the difference from a baseline, which it assumes all of the LMR is built and that the existing height and FSR is all built out for the site. So the difference, this is the difference from everything being built in the whole area and everything being built in the whole area plus the additional height and FSR. The only area where they do seem to quantify the total effect as opposed to the difference is in the CIDRA results. And for Victoria Road, Cowell Street intersection, they say that in 2040, the queue will be 1 kilometre long in the background. And with the development, it will go from 1 kilometre, 1,018 metres, to 1.1 kilometres, 1,108 metres long. So that means it'll queue, the right-hand turn into Cowell Street will queue past Junction, Sunnyside, etc. It'll go all the way down to the entrance to Gladesville Hospital. And you're right, because they've only done this sort of CIDRA modelling in a vacuum. So the assumption is that people are going to sit in a 1.1 kilometre queue at the end of, you know, Gladesville Hospital and somehow wait to sort of go up the street. LOSE, by the way, is basically failure. And they're not going to turn into Junction Street. They're not going to turn into those other streets. So there's a bit of a, it's what we call precise but inaccurate CIDRA modelling that's already gone in. But the implication of the modelling, I think, has adequately considered the impact of the development in this area. And they have quantified that at 1.1 kilometres of traffic queues in Cowell Street direction. And then they have said that they'll be turning on Massey Street, but then SCT did a peer review and said, but you can't turn in Massey Street because of the width, unless you fix it and make it a shared space. And then the other thing you said is you didn't see any mention of council-adopted traffic demand measures. In the SCT study, they said, well, in the original BITSOS study, they assumed that there was going to be car share and that would be a 1 to 20 replacement. That's what brought the cars down by about 40 cars. But then SCT said that that number needs to be evidenced and that they thought you couldn't get more than 1 in 10. And anyway, we haven't proposed to require any car share. So I think you're right in the sense that council adopted traffic measurements are non-existent, but it's not that those reports haven't flagged them. In fact, all of the reports, even in Third Eye, go into a lot of detail about the need to reduce the number of residential car parks, for example, because as SCT says, we have some of the highest rates in.
Councillor, is there a question coming?
Yeah, I suppose the question for me is, if we were reducing the residential car parking rates, so we weren't generating a 1.1 kilometre queue, and we were considering rat running, and we were adopting things like car share and pedestrian and cycle improvements like the shared space that SCT did in their second report, at that stage, do you think we might be in a position to start looking at a development in this area?
Yeah, I mean, you're essentially just
Don, if you can answer that one, that'd be good.
You're essentially endorsing what I've said, is that what's there is she'll be right, no worries, which is what the Bitsos thing said initially. And I didn't pick up that one about the 1.1 kilometres in the thousands of pages that are there. So I apologise for that. But that's not the reality of what will happen. If you get block up like that in traffic, then people will find other ways around it. And that's where the rat running comes from. I mean, I can imagine, can you imagine if there's that rat running there, everyone coming out of Morrison Street that wants to go to the, comes up Meriton Street from Morrison Road, right, that wants to go to the shopping centre, they'll turn right, turn left at Junction Street, right?
Yeah.
In that narrow little street, and then turn left again to go down Flagstaff Street to get to the shopping centre.
Yeah.
Is that an adequate solution?
So we need to do a lot more work.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Councillors, I see no more questions. Thank you. We have our next speaker, Gillian Wayne. Thanks, Gillian. Got 3 minutes.
And good evening, Mayor and councillors. My name is Guiyong Wang. I'm living in one of the townhouses of the Street 215 Massey Street. I'm not here to oppose the master plan. I have lived here for many years, and it is very much of our interest to see a successful Graceville Town Centre. So we are here tonight to offer some constructive suggestions before council finalize the proposal. So my main concern is the same as about the traffic and parking. So this master plan proposed a supermarket and over 500 apartments, serve about 894 parking space for residents, visitors, and commercial customers. Under the proposals, all the basement loading, waste collection, and service is funneled through Flagstaff Street, a street only 6 meters wide, one lane in each direction, and all the entrance and exit likely will be on the Flagstaff Street. So for this kind of street, council's own advisors suggest that Coward Street has its place of function and Massey Street for being too narrow. So leaving Flagstaff Street looks almost certain as the carry all the traffic load. And also right next to the public pedestrian lane as well. So there's a further physical problem. Flagstaff Street ends at the T-junction with the Massey Street, which is one way only. And every vehicle leaving the side heading to north must turn right. And also all the coming traffic to the side have to either come from the Massey Street or the Coward Street. So, but from what I read, the traffic impact assessment since didn't almost assign the 0% of the traffic impact to Massey Street, which doesn't reflect the reality on the ground. So by council's own admission, this arrangement has not been adequately assessed. The community impact of the daily truck movement, especially on the 6 meter wide kind of street, haven't been proper model. And there's no data at all of the Coral Street and Flagstaff Street intersection. Currently, in our Flagstaff Street, we don't have a truck. The truck can't go through the parking and directly go to the coast of that area. So there's no truck there. So as a resident of the Massey Street and the Flagstaff Street, and also the future residents of the quayside apartments and supermarket customers. We don't think anyone should have to wait 5 to 10 minutes to just leave their driveway or underground parking during peak hours. So my thinking is that to mitigate this, the most practical solution is to widen the Festa Street and potentially Massey Street as well.
Sorry, Joanne, moved extension time. Councillor Williams, second to Councillor Kasaba. All those in favour? Against, that is carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. So because 3 to 15 Massey Street sit directly at the corner of the Festa Street and Massey Street, so the most effective way to deliver this is to bring our site, which is the 3 to 15, into the quayside planning framework. And before the opportunity is loose, basically. And some of our neighbors like Rich have also spoken directly to the DPHI, who indicate that they are not opposed to our proposal, but want it to be re-exhibited, which can be done independently of the quayside master plan. So my request tonight is simple. Either we bring 3 to 15 Massey Street into the quayside plan, or we commit to re-exhibiting it as a standalone proposal. And either way, we need to complete the independent traffic assessment for more detail of the Massey Street, Festa Street, and the nearby street as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Lane.
There was some modelling by Bitsios of the Victoria Road Massey Street. They said that there'd be a queue that was 100 and something metres long, so that removes the 12 car spaces of parking that's currently a peak bus lane north. But I agree with you because SCT, when they did their peer review, said that that was probably not possible given the width of Massey Street. Your proposal doesn't necessarily fix that though, because we're only talking about the Flagstaff end. We still need to fix the other end of Massey Street, which the SCT report noted was out of the planning proposal boundary.
Councillor, can I get to, is there a question in this one?
Yeah, so the question is, don't we need to consider all of Massey Street to Victoria Street in order to resolve that problem?
Actually, Massey Street got a two part. From the intersection of the Festa Street to the Venus Street, actually it's much wider. Wider. So it's wider. And from the Massey Lane to the Festa Street, that area is narrow. So our block just sit between these two. So if we including our block in there, you actually have a chance to widen that part of Massey Street.
Councillors, any other questions? If not, thank you, Gavin. Thank you. The next speaker is Annette Gaillard. Thanks, Annette. You have 3 minutes.
Here representing the Hunters Hill Trust. The community's overwhelming opposition to this planning proposal has remained undiminished since 2021 when tower heights of 19 stories were first proposed by council. Then, as now, council has chosen to ignore this feedback and has made only very minor amendments to this contentious proposal. The state government identified numerous concerns in its Gateway report, many of which have not been adequately addressed. In particular, they cited the significant discrepancies between the proposed 19-storey height and floor space ratio of 4:1, which will not achieve compliance. To add insult to injury, we are now being asked by the developer to accept an even higher 26 to 27 stories to support development feasibility. Given higher interest rates and construction costs and potentially lower sale prices, will the developer soon expect even greater height? Council should be vigorously opposing this overdevelopment and insisting on a plan more in line with a well-resolved master plan, now scrapped after years in development and a spend of over $1 million of ratepayer funds. So we ask, why is this being rushed through? The community is rightly incensed that lesser height options have not been revisited. Council would have us believe that the two towers are the only economically feasible way to develop the site, but Councillor Lane has already demonstrated that it's perfectly possible to accommodate more than 500 units on this site within permissible heights, while developments along Victoria Road clearly demonstrate that lower-rise projects are economically viable. Residents have never been given the option to consider whether they would prefer less open space but lower height. Privately owned open space and walkways are likely to become wind tunnels and are not an adequate trade-off for oversized towers that will restrict access to sunlight. Neither has there been any substantial resolution to the problems of traffic congestion, crowded public transport, likely to continue for many years before any upgrades are made to Victoria Road. So why are residents being presented with a take it or leave it site-specific development? Council has justified the proposal by the need to meet state government housing targets, yet this site alone would deliver almost 25% more than the target for the whole LGA. This is without the 60+ new dwellings already completed, 144 units planned at the Montefiore site, and others, all of which will dramatically decrease the need for towers at Gladesville.
Sorry, Annette, moved extension of time, moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Kassab. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. I'll do that. Oh, sorry, I'll do that again. All those in favour? Against? That is carried.
Council has stated that VPA funds would contribute toward the community improvements required to support a vibrant and sustainable town centre. But this $20 million windfall is not destined for Gladesville Town Centre. Rather, it will be diverted to help fund Council's proposed development at Hunters Hill Village. This raises serious concerns. It does not appear to satisfy the gateway conditions and creates the perception of a significant conflict of interest. Council urgently requires funding for its own grandiose plans, yet it is Gladesville residents who will bear the consequences of an overdevelopment that fundamentally changes the character of their community.
Thanks, Annette. Councillors, any questions of Ms Callard? Sorry, Councillor Lane. Councillor.
Can you just confirm the 20 million? You're referring to the amount that we've hypothecated to the library in the.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bergara.
It's a clarification first before the question. So in 2022, council did the block studies, which were blocks 1, 2, 3, and 4. Block 4 had 3 options. I understand it. It's the paper, and in response to a public exhibition of those block studies, including block 4 with the 3 options, the result of the survey showed that the following were most important in regard to Gladesville: more public space. So in relation to the heights exhibited in block 4 in 2022, the feedback was more public space. Is that right?
That was my recollection, but I'll go through the general manager or the director.
I think that's correct.
Yes, that's when I went through all of the documentation, that seemed to be the
Tenor.
The tenor for the last 13 years of feedback.
So you said that no one's been given the option for less height and less public space. Residents were given less height and wanted more
So
in 2022.
So my understanding was that we started off with a master plan for a much larger site, and it looked as though there were possibilities for more open space in that much larger site. What's happened, and this is my understanding of what's happened, is that the site has contracted so that now it's a much smaller site. And I think somebody raised earlier that the public open space requirements of council have remained much the same. I think in this round of consultations, I think everybody expects that something should happen to that site. We believe that this is not the right proposal, and it's worth the time and the effort to get it right. And if we do that, then maybe it will mean less open space. But also the trade-off for that would be, lower towers.
Good question. But block 4 So there was blocks 1, 2, 3, and 4. Block 4 was essentially the key site, and that's
But block 4 is essentially the subject of tonight's, of the planning proposal that we're considering tonight, which is part of the master plan process that happened in 2022.
Thanks.
Councillors, any further questions of Annette? Councillor Lane.
I just wanted to ask a question of the General Manager. My recollection of the 2021 motion directed us to proceed with the master plan and explore lower height options. I don't recall there being anything about exploring more public open space. Could you just confirm?
Oh, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think I'd have to go back and look at the council resolutions to confirm that. I don't know whether the director has.
Just again, being relatively new to the process and thinking about through the council reports, it was the options were always around having 4,000 or about 3,800 to 4,300 square meters of open space. And that was sort of the commitment in those options that went forward. In 2021, the FSR was about 3-1 with 15-story buildings, and that was not accepted by the community because it was too tall. And so in that time, obviously with the planning reforms, we've now got housing bonuses through the housing SEP and all sorts of things that have given landowners much more flexibility to go past council and not deliver that. So what this proposal is not changing the base maps for the height and FSR. It's an outline for the key site to get bonuses up to these height limits.
Yep.
If they demonstrate all of the things in that clause 611, which is still committed to the 4,000 square metres of open space.
Yeah, but I guess, and I appreciate, as you said, you've come in reasonably late, but I guess the point is we seem to constantly in various submissions and now Councillor Vergara's question, circling around what are the fixes and flexes we've used, and it seems that we keep the open space as the fix and the height is the flex. And I'm just trying to understand, given that there was a council resolution in 2021, and perhaps we can look it up in the time that we're going to continue discussing it, but my recollection is that that was very clear, that it said progress the master plan, explore lower height options. Didn't say anything about public open space. So we've reversed where we've kept the public open space as the fix and flexed the height, but the instruction, which remains an unrescinded motion, was to explore lower height options, not to retain public open space.
And they explored and they're not viable.
I don't think that's true. I'm just asking what the resolution.
Councillors, is there any other questions of Ms Gallard? Not, thank you, Ms Gallard. Councillors, I'm going to move the motion in the paper with an amendment.
Mayor, I'm on my feet.
And I'm moving the motion, councillor, you can take a seat.
I was on my feet before we had the.
Yeah,
public-
sorry. So I'm going to move the motion, given the comments that we've received tonight with some amendments, that we have item 6, 7 and 8 added, and I think that might. You have a copy of those?
I don't think you can.
That the council, as part 6, notes the potential opportunity to further investigate whether site-specific local provision could be prepared to encourage the coordinated redevelopment of the Massey Street section, Massey Street transition area with the Gladesville Village site, subject to the appropriate public benefit urban design, access, open space and infrastructure outcomes. That point 7 would be authorises the General Manager to delegate to consult with the Department of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure and Council's legal advisors on the feasibility, form and procedural requirements for such a provision. And number 8, which would become notes the further investigation does not amend, replace or delay the planning proposal for the Gateway Village site presently before Council. Councillors, do I have a second to that motion? Seconded, Councillor Priest, that is on the floor. I'll speak to the motion briefly. Councillors, that is the motion as is in the recommendation, but considering that we had 3 speakers tonight from the block of 3 to 15 Massey Street, who all made very compelling arguments, and it's something that I've felt fairly strongly about throughout this master planning process, that the treatment of that block as inconsistent with the rest of the Gladesville key site, and I hate the term key site because I think that the whole of Gladesville needed master planning, which is why I brought the motion with Councillor Williams in 2019 for this process to kick off, is that we should be exploring that site as a opportunity to potentially massage heights and setbacks and potential traffic solutions within the context of the key site particularly, but also that I think that having an inconsistent streetscape to the rest of the development that is going to occur around that site, notwithstanding the 24 odd months of disruption to the immediate residents, that would be a sensible outcome. So this motion would give effect to the planning proposal as recommended, but would also include, as was discussed tonight by the residents of Massey Street, that the General Manager would be delegated effectively to engage with the Department of Planning to make sure that there is a planning pathway to see similar FSRs and heights allocated to that portion, so it is consistent for the entire site. Councillors, I'll move into debate and I'll have a right of reply, no doubt, at the end. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to foreshadow a motion, if I may.
Yes.
I find it totally unacceptable that you didn't allow me to put it forward, and I'll be seeking Office of Local Government's ruling on that decision. But if the staff could bring it up, I'd also like to add your number 6 to mine. So my foreshadowed motion would be to receive and note the submissions outcome report included in attachment 1 of the report. Note feedback received from the community as part of public exhibition of the Gladesville Master Planning Proposal and Development Control Plan, and thank all in the community for participating in consultation. 3, Council accepts the community's concerns regarding the unacceptable outcomes of the proposal and pursues a further process, developed outcomes, a lower height scheme option as per option 2 on page 15 in the report. 4, note not proceed with the current high-rise site-specific planning proposal with the Department of Planning and Housing and Infrastructure until an alternative has been identified that addresses the community concerns. And 5, in any future proposal, the DCP for the site must be considered at the same time. And 6, which was notes the potential opportunity, because I think that is something that did surprise me today, be included in that as well. So that's my foreshadow motion.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any speakers again for the motion?
Can I ask some questions?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Mayor, it's been evident tonight that there's been some discussions between yourself and various parties, either objecting or I guess there's been discussions with the Third Eye people. I was wondering.
I haven't had a discussion with Third Eye. No. I had this discussion with the residents of Massey Street. I've had discussions with the Gladesville Residents for Responsible Development, with 2RRR and Love Gladesville.
Aren't you required to report those to council with table?
But they were in the presence of the General Manager, Councillor.
Well, somebody should be tabling that information, because it's a bit of a surprise to me to hear what the discussions have taken place. And there was also a discussion there that there was different viewpoints about. My understanding is that if there is discussion with parties relating to development, that you need to table that, take some notes and table that with the council.
Councillor, I would suggest that residents reaching out to the Mayor and me arranging a meeting with the General Manager is not an unusual thing to do. And if the General Manager wrote notes about them, I'm sure that he can report them, but I don't think they were formal meetings.
Okay.
They weren't minutes of meetings, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, General Manager.
They weren't minutes of meetings, but they're all in our diaries. Over the last 20 years of being in and out of this industry, those meetings happen every day, all the time. I don't know anywhere that would document them and report them up to council.
Right.
It's just about having meetings with the community and affected people.
Yep.
Which is what we're here to do.
Can I ask a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager? Has he had discussions or negotiations with Third Eye in relation to this proposal?
Yeah, I've had quite a number of meetings with Third Eye to protect council's interests, making sure that things like voluntary planning agreements are going to be put in place so that we actually get the fair value and community benefit that the council should be seeking.
I can clarify, I was on 2RR radio with a proponent, with a person that worked for Third Eye, but it wasn't a meeting. It was 2RR facilitated a radio discussion.
My recollection of that was you were a proponent of the proposal rather than impartial mayor as a bystander. But anyway,
That might be your view, councillor, but that's not something that you need to that I need to minute and bring to council. And as the general manager has told you, it would be very unusual, and in his time nor my time have I ever seen that happen.
fair enough. Okay, so I'll speak against the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillor Williams.
I'll start by saying, what is the rush? We've got a situation where things have been dumped on councillors today, the DCP, whatever. The whole lot of information has been given to councillors at relatively short notice. Now you can say it was given, the bulk of the information was given a week or so ago. That's fine. But we still, today, we're getting documents from staff advising of variations and changes. I find that unacceptable. The other aspect to this that I find unacceptable, and because of this so-called rush, that we're now holding this meeting during school holidays. How genuine is that in terms of connecting and communicating with residents? We could have delayed it a few weeks and allowed a larger number of people to participate in the process. People in Huntersville are renowned for disappearing in school holidays to a whole range of opportunities which they have before them. So to hold it during school holidays, I think, is grossly limiting the opportunity for residents to participate in this process. As a strong supporter of the master planning process, 2018 or 19, it is clear that there is an overwhelming support for the revitalisation of the precinct, although not at any cost. And we've heard that today from speakers tonight, but nobody's saying we can't do anything. But I'm sure the vast majority of people are saying not at any cost. I cannot support the current planning proposal for several reasons, and for that reason, I suggest an alternative approach, which is my foreshadowed motion. The community response has been enormous and overwhelming, raising significant objections to the planning proposal, particularly height, overshadowing, and traffic. These have not been adequately addressed in the documentation, in my view, and obviously in many residents' view as well. The previous public exhibition responses in 2021 set a very clear guidelines for progressing forward. However, these have been ignored in the 4 years following, without further engagement by council with the community. And it has now prepared a planning proposal totally out of odds with the previous articulated community position. Council's position is inconsistent to when it fiercely objected to the 19-storey private planning proposal in 2020. This was successfully opposed by the community, council, and several government agencies. So what has changed now for the council to pursue a massive increase in size, bulk, and scale, including 2 potential 23-story buildings. And people here have been talking about 19 stories. But if you research it, the industry says a 70-metre high building can be up to 25 stories within that envelope, most commonly between 20 and 23. So I couldn't imagine any developer who would not take that option of maximising their outcome. So basically, we're talking about a 23-story building, not 19. In this process, council has expended a very large amount of money to not land on a place the community could support. One could imagine a situation where council could have a conflict of interest with driving housing uplift in one location and receiving large amounts of money that are then going to be used in a distant location for council's own project. And as we've seen with Montefiore, that voluntary planning agreements are not necessarily guaranteed. And it'll be council needs to really think carefully about the benefit of a voluntary planning agreement or Section 12 contributions, because they may not produce the sort of income. And why is council going to spend that money elsewhere? It should be spent in the Gladesville community. The role of Third Eye in this development of the planning proposal is unclear, with major concessions being provided in the minimum site area. It's amazing how during this process we've now dropped from a situation just because a developer wishes to change the overall area, as obviously they may not be able to secure the full site. Now this decision is not quantified within the reports. There's no map that shows what the new, every map you see still has the original planning proposal boundary on it. We don't have in the documentation any clarity as to what this new area is, nor do we have a document or documents, many documents, that actually reflect that change. All the exhibition, all the discussions in the documentation is around the larger area, not the area that's been changed supposedly to accommodate the objection from Third Eye. There is also, and it's something I've raised before and got agreement on, but it still persists. There's a big difference between a master plan, which is what we embarked on originally and spent a lot of money to get to, and a site-specific planning proposal. We have here a site-specific planning proposal, which now is to the benefit of a developer. We now have the opportunity, I hope, to look at the Massey Street houses to incorporate them in some way into the proposition. The document refers to publicly accessible open space of 4,000 square metres, with only 1,700 square metres must be for publicly accessible public open space, which is a major reduction. This will not necessarily be public open space. As I understand it, we're talking about private open space, which is not controlled in the same way as if it was public open space. One would assume the developer could make that space available for its own residents. Comparison's been made with the canopy, and I raised that before. It is just a spurious concept. What we're talking about here has nothing in similarity to the canopy. and should be treated as something totally separate. Yeah, the public accessible open space is dominated by 6-metre walkways that will provide minimal aesthetic value. It is noted that the open space will be significantly impacted by shared zone, allowing vehicles access across and loss of amenity and safety. If you look at the diagrams, the main open space areas have this shared pathway on the edge of it. How that can be a suitable outcome for the public in a open space area to have trucks and whatever trundling down the area, albeit a shared zone. Yeah, the flexibility of the development potential is flawed as it does not consider external financial or market factors adequately. How is it possible for low-scale development to be viable on the southern side of Victoria Road? And I would assume, without doing any calculation, the 10 new developments on that side, averaging around about 6 to 9 stories, would be equivalent, if not more, of what's being proposed on the key site. But in Ryde, they can achieve a much lower scale development, but still achieve the similar outcome as what we're trying to do. So I reject the concept that there's not another proposal, another way of doing this. It is unacceptable to just say we have to do this or somebody will step in above us. I've heard tonight, and I think that's very relevant, that the Woolworths concept up the road is talking about 14 stories, not 19, or as I would say, 23 stories, but 14 stories. So if they can do it, why can't it be done in our location? We also are pursuing a total fix for our housing targets with this one development. But as we know, and I don't think the residents are fully aware, that the LMR or LRM, which is the low to medium rise policy of the government, will yield significant new residents in the surrounding precincts. So to say that this is the only change in Gladesville, I don't agree. And we've heard tonight from one of the residents suggesting that this will compound the traffic situation as well. It disregards the recommendation of the Undersort Planning Panel to maintain continuity along the precinct as envisaged in the original master plan. We seem to have jettisoned the master plan in favour of a site-specific planning proposal. The reference in the document that if we don't accept this, it could be a worse outcome is unacceptable if left to the government or developer. The current proposal is already unacceptable. So if it does get out of our control, then it might get a little bit worse, but at the moment, at 70 metres, is still totally unacceptable. And I think that's important what Woolworths are doing. And if they do 14 stories, and the government doesn't step in, why would they step into our location? The supermarket size, the planning proposal requires 5,000 square metres of retail space, with a full-line supermarket generally being 4,000 plus square metres. Leaves little space for specialty shops. So basically, we're going to end up with what we've got at the moment, plus all the problems associated with the bigger development. The report also ignores the presence of Aldi and the potential for what Woolworths are going to do, because it refers to the only supermarket as being in Top Ryde. and they've just ignored what's going on our own doorstep. The original building was required to have whole floor of public, and I date back a long way. And I do remember the 2001 decision, and I agree with Councillor Lane. But back when this shopping centre was first built, it was built on a open car park. Now, in that process, because the community and the shops around were losing that car park, the reason there's 2 floors of car parking there in the new build, or the current building, is because council required 1 floor to compensate for the loss of the surface parking which the shops and the locals had access to. So in this new proposal, that's out the window. The whole site is based on the development, and there's no contribution there for community or for the businesses locally to access parking, which they used to have. And to my way of thinking is that with this development, okay, you can have shared bikes and whatever, but that only appeals to a certain number of people. Modern lifestyle in Sydney requires motor transport. And what we're going to have, if you reduce the number of parking in this facility to a fantasy that will have people using other forms of transport, is that the residents will suffer. People will park away from the development and will park in residential streets, and the competition for those parks will increase. Now, in the report, it makes reference to a resident parking scheme, which, based on the traffic study, is a really narrow perspective of Massey Street, Carl Street, Flagstaff Street. People will park beyond that and have an easy walk back to the facility. So the residents will lose out big time in terms of their ability to park in the streets. Reference to 10 Carl Street, I find amusing. Not amusing, I found interesting. Is that it's the wording that was used. I forget the wording, but there was specific wording used there. The council happy to forgo that site. I don't recall any motion of council to lose that. And in actual fact, in the Gateway proposal in 2017, council was required to identify sites for relocation of the cottage prior to exhibition of the planning proposal. I'm not advocating relocation, but just to take some pictures and put a plaque up to represent what was a significant building in our heritage life, I think is unacceptable. The planning proposal does not meet the DCP development priorities 4, 5 and 6. I was quite amazed that on reading the DCP that those important elements are not considered nor discussed. And I think the closing remarks that Mr. Sanderson made in his objection that was read out is very pertinent to where I stand on this. Even if it is appropriate to spend ratepayers' funds on a planning proposal that delivers for the developer rather than the community, which it is not. This proposal has too many flaws to allow its adoption. So I've heard the residents tonight. I heard them at the community meeting, and it's very clear to me that what we're offering here is not acceptable, does not deliver on community expectations, and it needs to go back and to address the original foundation of what we were trying to achieve. And that's not large buildings at any cost.
Well said.
Against the motion, councillor Lane.
I'd like to reiterate what councillor Williams said, that he had the floor for his motion, and I think that this isn't ready, and we should have been given the opportunity to speak to his motion, and hopefully we can get to speak to it if this motion is defeated, because the proposal isn't ready at the moment. I'd like to also, I've got 4 amending motions which we can deal with later. I don't know if or do they have to be dealt with now?
Are you proposing amendments to the current motion, or are you proposing amendments to be added to the foreshadowed motion?
Given that that's been slotted in before councillor Williams, then yes, that's the best we can do.
What are your proposed amendments, councillor?
The staff have them.
That came just before this meeting started.
Don't we have to deal with
No, these are amendments to the motion, councillor Preston. As I understand it, you're moving an amendment. Yep.
Will have to be.
Sorry, councillors.
So that's the 4th. You should have another 3. No, the fourth is just a long one.
Would you like to move them in block, councillor?
No, I wouldn't. I would like to move them individually, because when we move them in block, we don't get to discuss them. And given that we're dealing with 1900 pages of document, I think.
So could you read out the motion, the amendment that you're proposing?
Sure. So the first amendment is to add a clause that reads the appropriate number. Prior to submitting the planning proposal, A, amend clause 6.11.3 to replace 70 metres with 45 metres. That would give effect to the 15 stories, which we can talk about when we go into the amendment. The second one is to amend clause 6.11.5 in attachment 2, page 27, to add the words G, built form over 28 metres limited to a floor space maximum of 750 square metres of gross floor area, and H, no part of the ground floor of a building is facing the street or public space to be used for the purposes of residential accommodation, with the exception of Flagstaff Street. Those are 2 things that were supposed to be in the objects of what we're doing and are mentioned in the DCP.
Sorry, I don't need an explanation of your amendments. I need your amendments verbatim.
Sure.
And then I can understand whether or not it's...
Sure.
Yep.
And then C is to undertake a solar access study of Gladesville Public School between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. midwinter, and a wind study, and then define the specific parts of the site where the built form is permitted to exceed 28 metres, i.e. towers, and include this as a map to supplement figure 12. That's the first motion.
Councillor, we don't have those.
So I was told that when you submitted multiple with resolve, you have the record of all 4. But I can resubmit all 4 together because I've got my laptop here. Do you want me to do that?
Perhaps email it, councillor, might be easier. Is that the end of your proposed amendment?
That's the end of the first one, yep.
Yep. And you want to deal with all the amendments individually?
Yes.
Is that seconded? Seconded, councillor Williams. Councillor Lane, would you like to speak to? If you could email that, and we'll put it up. Yes. Maybe email all 4 for.
Yes, I am.
Ease of the staff.
To yourself, GM.
GM, and I can pass it on.
Yep. Councillor, would you like to speak to your amendment?
I would just at hunterstill.newsouthwales.gov.au. Sorry, I'll just be so yes, so this one is to give effect to the first of the issues around height that we've heard about. So as the Collier's report shows, for 4:1, 15 stories is enough. That's a fairly standard thing. In fact, if you do the calculations on our current site, even if you take 4,000 square metres out, the remainder of the smaller site, that's the 1.16 hectares that we're currently talking about, still allows you to develop at 4:1, and it's 7.5 stories. So that's 15 stories basically allows you to only do 50%. But the reason I'm looking at 15 stories is a couple of things. One is I know that it's feasible because I've tested it myself and Colliers has also tested it. Secondly, it also takes account of the bonuses that the developer is eligible to get. So there's a 30% bonus under the housing step. And that means that 15 stories can become effectively 19 stories. And I believe you've read this as well, Councillor Tanner-Sleeman. What we don't want, and what Council has quite clearly said in its report, is we don't want to see the 27 stories that the developer is proposing. And yet, at the moment, with a 70-metre height, which, as Councillor Williams has said, is not actually 19 stories, but 70 metres, the bonus, which is it's a 30% of the height that's mentioned, would actually get you up to that amount. And then once you've got your approval, then you can go to the Housing Development Authority, which is the triumvirate that's now been set up, and you can get even more, but only if you've got your approval. So this safeguards as a bare minimum that we get 15 stories, which we know is feasible, and we allow a flex that if we get affordable housing, which we heard from Sydney Yimby is one of the key outcomes that we're looking for the site, then potentially it can go up slightly higher, but it doesn't go up to the 20s and 27s. The second point is really a functional one. So we've been doing this really quickly and it's not ready. And one of the ways that you can tell that is that in the DCP, 2 objectives were included that are supposed to be mirroring the document, but they're not actually mirroring the document. So literally, if you look at attachment 2, page 27, you'll see that those 2 objectives talked about. Sorry, it's a new DCP, so I'll have to find the page number. But they should have been in the planning document itself, so I'm just putting them back in. The reason that they're important is because they constrain the size of the towers. So lots of the submissions talk about this idea of a fast-moving shadow, and you will have seen in Third Eye's own submission to us that what they're currently looking at is a toast rack. And what's quite interesting actually is if you compare their submission, which is I think page 1024 of the big thing, is that it looks almost identical to the 2013 scheme in that it's a toast rack. And the reason I think they've got to that is we haven't actually constrained the size of the towers. We also haven't put in a minimum width for the public open space. So technically, you can have a public open space on Massey Street that's only 6 metres wide and it would satisfy the clause. It's just another drafting error. But in combination, at the moment, without constraining those towers, we will end up with exactly the toast rack that the 2013 scheme objected to. The part about the ground floor being active, I think we heard that a lot of people are looking for this idea of an amount of activation. I don't need to really justify it, actually. It is in the DCP. It just didn't make it into the document by accident. The third one is Gladesville Public School is quite interesting. So City of Ryde wrote to us and they said a few things. One of the things that they said was that we hadn't looked at the Gladesville Public School overshadowing in the right time period, and they specifically called out from 7 to 9 a.m. And so I'm asking for that work that they have identified to be done. In fact, I asked for it in February. And the wind study, which was raised in our own guide. So the planners said that a wind study had to be done. And again, we haven't done that, so I'm asking for that to be done. And the wind study will inform where these towers need to be. And I think Councillor Sanderson was right that if we don't determine where specifically these towers are going to be, then the developer will have every right within the entire key site to put their towers, which mean that even though we've said that there's a marginal impact on Gladesville Public School and Trim Place, actually there is nothing stopping that tower from sailing west almost to the edge, the western edge of the site, and having a much larger overshadowing outcome. And again, we just haven't protected ourselves because we've rushed it. So those are the first 3 amendments that I'm proposing in motion 1.
Thank you, Councillor. Any speakers against the amendment? Questions? Councillor Vergara. To staff or to Councillor Lane?
It's probably a bit of both. Okay, so Councillor Lane said that the 15 stories was feasible, actually economically feasible.
Yes, that's what I mean.
And that Colliers have confirmed that. Is that right? So Colliers have said over the key site, you can get.
My understanding is it was not the key site. That is purely the site that was commissioned for the owners of the Massey Street lots, not the key site.
Because that's my concern, because I would like something less than 19 stories. Sorry, 70 metres. So that's not, sorry, it's 70 metres. But as I'm sort of 15 stories to 45 metres was put forward and found not to be economically feasible.
I'll let the general manager or the director answer, but my understanding is that testing has been done.
So I'll just pass to Jeff, but essentially the 4-to-1 FSR, the reason it's gotten to 19 stories here is to give the ground plane the public accessible space. The Massey Street block, it's 15 stories alone, and it doesn't have that necessarily as large open space delivery that provides the community benefit. So you can have a 14-story tower like Woolworths. It's not giving anything on the ground plane back to the community, as is the Massey Street proposal as is. If the Massey Street proposal was integrated into the whole key site and you looked at it differently and it was amalgamated as part of an assessment through design excellence as the bonus, you could maybe achieve something that's lower at that point.
I'd also suggest that under the state planning pathway, although the example's been given of Woolworths down the road, there's just been a Housing Delivery Authority state pathway approval on the old Sawdust Hotel site of 18 stories with no public benefit. No deep soil planting, nothing.
Where's that?
The old Sawdust Hotel site up in Claysville. Councillor, do you have another question?
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay, Claysville Public School, the solar access. I understood that we did do further testing and that period between 7 and 9:30 is actually addressed in these submissions, and they're found to lose, it's an hour, or they get 33% of shadowing over the trim place and a bit of the school forecourt between that period of time, but then from 9:30 get solar access. Is that right?
That's correct. And we did further testing from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. That's in the report, but it demonstrates that there's a probably little sun on the very end of trim place and into the forecourt of the school, which is the basketball court, the hard stand. It doesn't impact any classroom. It doesn't impact any of the green space. And then from 8 a.m. onwards, the sunlight comes in. It's fully in sun from about 9:30, I think it was, onwards. That's at the winter solstice, so that's at the the longest shadow of the day. That's also done with buildings that are this is just a massing exercise for the purpose of seeing what fits in this space for that FSR. So the shadowing diagrams are done on a massing. It doesn't take into consideration any of the GFA loss that you get once you start having architecture and built form in a way that's going to deliver the amenity that you want. So you're going to have tall, slender towers, but not going to be as impactful as the massing diagrams that we have in our plans.
Yeah, I understand that. I think you're saying it's the worst case. And then, then I accept the point that depending on where those masses are, we haven't put any controls in where they are and we're testing them in a certain spot and they move them, then that testing's useless. But am I right? I think I read in the paper that some of those considerations, so solar access, are considered as part of design and engineering on DA application. So you could put conditions in which would ensure no less than what the papers now say is the solar access. Is that right? That the DA can deal with some of those things?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, and we would put it in as part of design excellence.
Councillor, any other questions?
I'm a little bit confused now, because I think the thing that needs to be resolved first, and maybe I'm going to move it for shuttered.
Are you speaking to the amendment?
Yes, I'm going to maybe do a second for shuttered motion that this be deferred, because for me the key thing is economic feasibility. And if we're going to incorporate the Massey Street and something less than 19 stories is viable on that integrated site, then that would be my preference. But I won't yet formally move that.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Councillor Lane.
Yeah.
Question.
Can I maybe speak to that?
And you can do that in your right of reply. Councillors, any speakers for the motion? Just for the amendment? Against the amendment? Right of reply.
Yep. Thank you. So the point I was making about the 4-to-1 and the 15 stories is just that Collier's showed that a 15-story building on a 4-to-1 with the 800 square metres in their smaller site was all feasible, which leads me to the view that on the larger site, if you did the work, you would be able to get 15 stories. And separately, I've done that work. The feasibility study, and we can confirm this, they don't look at an actual building, they just look at the numbers. So they've looked at 4 to 1 and they've said 4 to 1 is that between 3, 4 and 4.75 is what they tested, and they said we should do 4. And so I'm not proposing we reduce the FSR, I'm proposing we move around the massing. I know some people would prefer we also reduce the FSR, but I don't think that's going anywhere. I think though that where I agree with you, I think in terms of your deferral is, and in fact, Councillor Williams, when you said it, is there are significant things that we still need to explore. And the tube of toothpaste analogy that the Mayor used is absolutely right. So while from a numbers game, we can talk about 4 to 1 and 15, the reason why whole site master plans are done, in fact, the reason why you master plan town centres and not key sites, is so that you can push around that mass to get a nice regular shape. And at the moment, we have a very irregular shape, and that is driving poor outcomes. And in fact, we have our third eye scheme in the submissions, which is a poor outcome in my view, because it looks like the toe strap. And so from that point of view, I agree with you. We could definitely do more if we address the many small and large things that I think remain to be. This amendment is really just trying to knock off the corners of what I think is a bad scheme. But if we are all agreeing that we need to go back to the drawing board, I support you in going back to the drawing board. What I don't support is us going forward with the 19th story as proposed, because among other things, it's too high and doesn't consider a very developable block that the owners have gone and commissioned a scheme for.
Councillor Preston.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, through you, I think, to the director.
Point of order.
Sorry, councillor, I'm just reading the motion. No, you can't, because the...
That was a right of reply.
Yeah, sorry, that was right of reply. Councillors, that is the first of 4 motions proposed by Councillor Lane. Those in favour of the motion?
Amendment, yes.
Sorry, amendment. Those against? That is lost. Sorry, I'll do that again. Those for? Against? That is lost. Councillor Lane, do you wish to put your second amendment?
Sure, we can go through this. So my second one...
To move them in block, or would you prefer to go...
No, I would like to deal with them individually.
Okay.
So
did you read verbatim the amendment you're proposing? Yep. And then you can get into debate.
So this is to add a new clause. Prior to adopting chapter 4.4 of the DCP, amend as follows. A, add a new clause to section 6.1.12, transport and access, as follows. It'll be number O, notwithstanding DCP clause 5.3, car parking and vehicle access, the maximum parking rates for land to which this document applies are 0.8 spaces per 1 bedroom, 1 space per 2 bedroom, 1.2 spaces for 3 or more bedrooms, and 1 visitor space per 7 units, noting that this reflects the rates recommended by the SCP report, page 9, etc. B, amend section 6.1.12, transport and access, item G, to delete the sentence beginning any required mitigation measures identified through this investigation must be implemented to maintain and improve the performance of the road network, and replace it with the development must deliver or contribute to the cost of, at council's discretion, mitigation measures to improve the performance of the road network or reduce traffic impacts of the development, including without limitation improvements to the public or active transport in the local area. And it says D, it should say C, apologies. Amend 6.1.13 loading and basement access to replace and or with or, and add to the end as one consolidated vehicle entry no more than 8 metres wide.
Is that seconded? Councillor Williams, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Yes. The current report shows a 1.1 kilometre queue to Cowell Street, and that's being driven by, as the SCP report notes, some of the highest car parking rates for residential car parking in Sydney. So we are, as a council, inducing traffic at the moment in Gladesville Town Centre, and this master plan perpetuates that. And we now have the Sidra modelling that tells us just how bad our own car parking policy is. Both of the traffic consultants recommended that we adopt maximum parking rates and reduced parking rates. And then Third Eye wrote and they asked us for even lower parking rates and maximum rates as well. And we didn't adopt it because we said that, people complained about car parking in the local area. And that was just a mistake because residential parking and visitor parking are two separate things. And actually, the DCP says that we must grandfather the existing public car park in the new site. So what happens is we've got lots of residential parking that we're requiring, lots of visitor parking that we're requiring, and lots of traffic impacts that are a result. And the EPNA Act says you need to mitigate, we're just not mitigating. So that's the first one, is just to adopt the maximum car parking rates that our own consultants recommended so that we're not putting 1.1 kilometre queues through Batesville Town Centre. The second one is Transport for New South Wales asked us to spend lots of money on the road network, love Shane Schneider, but the point is that is not actually where we should be spending our money. And so what I've just said is that we should, at our discretion, determine how the improvements are made, and we shouldn't constrain them to road widening because there are other things we can do. And then the third one, in the loading and basement access, there is this possibility that Cow Street could be an alternative access. But if you've gone down to Flagstaff Street, at the moment, that facade is absolutely awful. And part of the reason why it's awful is it has two large car park entrances. We don't constrain the number of car park entrances. And by saying and/or, we actually increase the number of car park entrances onto another street. I think Cow Street's probably the better street to enter on, but nevertheless, it just should be an or so that we're not replicating more and more and more entrances. And again, that's consistent with how most of these areas are designed. So I would refer to, as a better example, Surrey Hills Village that has a single consolidated entrance. So those are just to knock off the corners of the traffic and parking issues.
Councillor Vergara.
So the first part is probably to Councillor Lane through you. The first part of that amendment is just to reduce the amount of parking required that the development is required to have. Is that right?
Yes.
So, councillor, how does reducing the parking required in any way benefit the amount of cars that are going to be attending site? I would imagine that would not assist local streets that would carry the burden of the parking.
So at the moment, we require the developer to deliver a minimum amount of residential parking, and car parking, car ownership, car use are all related. And so the traffic generation, and in fact, there's a discussion in the paper about the low versus high accessibility. Traffic generation is predominantly determined by the number of car spaces that you put into.
So you want less car spaces for
residents.
The residents.
That's
okay.
right.
All right. Clarified. Councillors, any speakers for the motion? For the amendment, sorry. Councillor Williams?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
you've
Mr.
got the call.
For or against? I'd be for, just to be able to get the rough edges cut off, what is probably inevitable to happen. But I do stress that fiddling around the edges to try and reduce the number of cars is fundamentally, in my view, flawed, because it's the scale of development is driving the problem, not the number of the development will have a subsequent number of vehicles. If it's only 15 stories instead of 23 stories, you're going to have less people and less vehicles. And I am very concerned if the surrounding streets are impacted as a result of having less available vehicle space for those residents. And more importantly, as I raised before, we've got a scenario where the shopkeepers and the businesses in the local area use that car park at the moment for their customers and their clients. So reduce the car parking even further, add the number of people being greater, everybody loses out. So the solution
Just to be
is
clear,
reduce the size.
councillor, can I just ask, you're saying reduce the car parking?
No.
Well, that's what you've seconded the motion.
I can second the motions for the purpose of debate.
You don't agree with lessening the car parking ratio?
No, my solution would be to lessen the development.
Okay.
To fit to what cars.
I just want to be clear.
To fit what could be coped with in the streets. If you've got 1.5 kilometres,
thank you, councillor.
Then of traffic, that tells me the scale of the development is far too big. And just by reducing the ability for residents to park on site drives them off site.
Yes. Any speakers For, against the motion, against the amendment, for the amendment? Right to reply, councillor Lane.
The current amount of visitor parking has to be replicated according to our own DCP, so I don't think that's an issue.
The amendment, all those in favour? Against? That is carried. Councillor Lane, you have another, sorry? Lost. Councillor Lane, you have another amendment?
This is public benefit.
Like to read it?
Yes. Add a new clause. Prior to submitting the planning proposal, amend clause 6.11 in attachment 2, page 27 to add the following words. So it'll be numeral 6, a minimum 10% affordable housing as defined by the Housing SEP 2021 must be provided on the key site. And 7, a community facility no less than 1,000 square metres must be dedicated to council with direct street frontage no less than 12 metres wide for council's use for a branch library or similar public use.
Thank you, councillor. Is that seconded? Councillor Williams?
Point of order.
Yes, councillor.
Understand from the code meeting practice that a motion that requires the expenditure by council of funds has to identify the source of the funds. Would council own land dedicated for that purpose require the expenditure of funds?
I'll defer to the general manager. I don't believe so. I don't believe so, but general manager.
So if I could just get you to clarify the question, just.
Well, so as I understand it, some of the land is going to be owned by council. Like
Under this motion,
under that
correct?
motion.
Yes,
Are you going to spend money to maintain it?
you would, yes.
Well, then the motion has to identify the source of those funds.
General manager, that's line ball, that one, I have to say.
No, I think, no, I don't think it does at this point.
It doesn't do what?
You don't need to identify the funds for the running of the library.
Anyway, for the purposes of debate, I will continue. So is that seconded, councillor?
Yes.
Williams, yes. Councillor, any speakers against?
Can I ask a question?
Yes. Councillor, Prieston.
Can I ask a question? Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe to the director. With the second proposed amendment in this motion.
This second point in the amendment of the
Correct.
motion, yes.
Entitled 7 there. Would this be via a VPA arrangement that council obtains?
It's not specified, councillor, but
It's an amended clause. Is this feasible? Because it sounds good to me, but how would we go about taking private land and turning it into?
Traditionally, that would be done via a voluntary planning agreement, although the affordable housing.
I'm not interested in that one. I'm interested in number 7.
Okay.
So the seconder of the motion mentioned earlier that VPAs are not a given. So I just would love to know how we could enact.
Councillor, I'll let the general manager answer, but traditionally that would be done via a VPA. And a voluntary planning agreement.
And I can only agree with that.
Acronyms.
Would take negotiation with any developer, and a VPA would need to be put in place, and that VPA form a total value of whatever whatever other community benefit we get. So it's there's only so much that they'll be willing to give us, whether it's how we cut and dice it, whether it's 1,000 square metres for a community facility, or whether it's additional open space, or whether it's money for traffic, doing traffic works. All those things will be part of the voluntary planning agreement.
And to be clear, the VPA is included in the proposal. Well, a request for a VPA.
Certainly.
I know that the report details.
We're certainly in discussions for a VPA.
Yeah.
And we've set a draft, but we didn't think that was good enough. We've gone back for additional work on that. We're waiting on the next draft to come through. That said, depending on where council lands, that may disappear if there is a negotiation with councils. You have to deal straight with the state government.
Okay, well, through you, Mr Mayor, to Councillor Lane, I'd be in favour of proposing an amendment to the recommendation in the business paper, which
Sorry,
just
councillor,
explicitly
sorry, councillor, you
states
can't
that-
at this point because we're not debating the motion in the business paper. We're
Okay.
debating an amendment to the motion in the business paper.
Can't
And
support
councillor
the
Lane has the call. Councillor Lane, did you wish
Can
to
I
speak
ask
to
a
the?
question before?
You may, councillor Williams.
I haven't heard any mention of what I think is the right term, section 12 contribution. Is there
Section 712s, yep.
Sorry?
Section 712s.
Yeah, that's probably it, yep, as opposed to 711s.
Yes.
So, are we expecting to be able to levy section 712s from this development?
General Manager?
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor, yes.
Yes.
At 1% under the current regime.
So what quantum would that be, roughly?
Based on initial figures, around $4 million.
Right, which would be more than enough to satisfy the 1,000 square metre discussion we've just had as to where the funds might come for the upkeep of the building.
I think you'd need to do some costing as to how much 1,000 square metres is going to cost to deliver. Because if you want 1,000 square metres, you don't need to be an offset.
Anyway, that was the question.
I don't use both.
Councillor Williams, you comfortable? Councillor Lane, do you wish to speak to your amendment?
I'd like to speak to my amendment. There aren't offsets from requirements of a planning proposal. That's why we have to go through the feasibility process to show that it's feasible. The 712 should be 3% because we're looking at that in the long term, but we're rushing, so we've only got the 1%. But the point is, I suppose, that when in planning terms you use the word dedicated, that's just a requirement. It doesn't affect your planning agreement. The word V, the letter V in VPA is supposed to be voluntary, although these days we just call them planning agreements. But the point is you can't compel an outcome from a planning agreement, which is why you have to put it in the detail of what you want. And the reason why I've specified a community facility for a library is that the City of Ryde Council's own submission to us flagged the fact that we needed to consider a library, but we couldn't rely on their branch library. And our own social needs assessment identified the need for a library in Gladesville, but relied on the branch library that is in City of Ryde that they have explicitly told us not to rely on. And so I'm trying to safeguard an outcome that we know we need, which is a community facility. And I've come up with 1,000 square metres because I looked at the library facility standards provided by the State Library, and if you want a population of between 12 and 15,000 people to be served by a library, it needs to be between 828 and 1,035 metres, which got me 1,000 metres. And then for a community facility, it should be open to the street with a minimum facade. That's why our current library facility isn't working in Hunters Hill. So again, I'm trying to fix two problems here. One is that we have no affordable housing whatsoever that's required. And just as a note, this current planning proposal has reduced the site area by 1/5. And the cost of acquiring the sites that we have now relieved Third Eye of acquiring amounts to 2% of the total feasibility of the scheme. And the cost of the car parking that we are now requiring them to provide in excess of what they should be providing also amounts to 2%. So we can more than afford to have the affordable housing on the site. And again, that work was done under the GSRP. If we don't require any affordable housing on the site, we're entirely reliant on them increasing the height above 70 metres in order to deliver any affordable housing at all. And I see, unfortunately, we've lost our Sydney Yimby person, but there will be no affordable housing on this site unless we specify a minimum amount, and the housing set deals with that, and 10% is already viable according, as I said, to the Greater Sydney Region Plan. So all I'm trying to do is to safeguard two minimum public benefits. I also reject the fact that we're getting any public benefit from publicly accessible open space, since that is not public space and there is no guarantee of its use. Can go down to Chippendale and see how publicly accessible open space is used for things like gambling cubes. But nevertheless, if we are to have a public benefit, it should be an actual public benefit. And if we don't have these and we're relying on a VPA, we are not going to get these public benefits. And also it's not transparent, and that has been commented on previously by ICAC in relation to, in fact, ICAC specifically said that councils should avoid reliance on BPAs and should put the requirements that they are looking for to deliver on major sites in the requirements that they are asking for, because that reduces the chance of corruption, and that was in a previous case. And so I commend that if we do think that affordable housing and community facilities are important, that we actually put that as the requirements in the planning proposal.
Councillor, what is a gambling cube?
It's advertising on Six Faces talking about gambling to all of the residents and visitors.
I've never
You can
heard
go
that.
down
I've never
and
heard
visit
that.
it.
I'll go on. I'll have a look into it.
They call it the cube, but
No
it's
gambling
the-
cubes in Gladesville.
Well, you can't control that. That's the point.
Okay. Any speakers against the amendment? Councillor Priest.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll just keep it brief. I think that we really ought to be taking a practical view to this, and I really cannot fathom or foresee how a private owner would gift council 1,000 square metres of land with direct street frontage no less than 12 metres wide for us to use as a branch, library, or similar public use in any case. So I'm a little perplexed by this proposed resolution of council to do so. And then also, we've just heard in discussions at the last council meeting from Councillor Lane about a proposed library site in Hunters Hill, that there needs to be a proper feasibility test undertaken for any expenditure of council funds. So I'm a little bit confused about how we could resolve as a council to submit a planning proposal which includes a community facility from gifted private land for a council-run facility which has no indication of costs to run or upkeep that imaginary facility. So I can't support it. I'm sorry.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor, any speakers for the amendment? Councillor Williams.
Thought we just had, didn't you do a response? Reply?
Was it who was speaking to the motion?
I have, okay.
Sorry.
Stuff.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Really, very eloquent in that start. Yeah, I can't understand why we wouldn't build into this proposal 10% affordable housing. It must be a consideration in all developments, in my mind, if we're going to overcome the problem that was alluded to of people sleeping in their cars. They're not going to be able to afford the sort of property prices that we've talked about here, unless it's made an affordable housing outcome. Even with that, it really is just flat banking for the developer, because he only has to keep it for 15 years, and then in 15 years' time it's probably worth twice the price, and they walk away to the bank with a large amount of cash in their pocket. So affordable housing to me is a big omission in the current planning proposal for the key site. It hasn't appeared anywhere in the debate or discussion. The other issue about community facility, I think the important word there is community facility. It's not specifying a library. We have the problem by council's decision to move to the sale of our Pittwater Road site. But we've got a community occasional daycare there that will be looking for a new home once Ryde do their development on the site. So to me, community facility is the correct term. It doesn't have to be a library. It could be for an occasional daycare, or it could be for another community-based purpose. So I support the amendments, again, because it will improve what is already a bad deal.
Can I
Thank
ask
you,
a question?
Councillor Priest. Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just through you to the General Manager. To clarify, the occasional childcare facility that Councillor Williams is referring to is a privately run organisation.
Community-run organisation.
It's a community
But
association.
for profit.
It's not run for.
It's not-
No, it's not for profit.
Not for profit, but not run by council.
Not by run by council.
Thank
Council.
That does have the access to council's building,
Correct.
which this would be equivalent.
Correct.
Provide a unique service that's not available anywhere else in the business.
Thank you. Thank you, councillor Williams. Any speakers against the amendment? For the amendment? Right of reply, councillor Lane.
Thank you. I think there's some confusion that I just wanted to clarify. Dedicating 1,000 square metres of floor space is not dedicating land. It's pretty standard. This is what was done in roads to deliver. In fact, it's done everywhere. I guess
Contingent.
It's
not guaranteed.
Yeah, no, it is guaranteed.
Councillor,
This is just how.
Please
This
let
is just
councillor
how
Lane.
you.
Please let councillor Lane have the call. He's got a right of reply.
So how you dedicate a bit of floor space in a building is by requiring that floor space to be dedicated. And because the developer is already building a big building, it comes at almost no cost as opposed to building a brand new building in a park with facades and all the rest of it. That's why dedication of public facilities is usually done in this manner. Nevertheless, I suppose we do need to provide a branch library in Gladesville because our social needs study has established that. And you can look at libraries like Surrey Hills Library, which has a childcare centre in the roof, to understand what a similar public use in a community facility looks like. So all of these things are abundantly normal and typical. And if we had been councillors in other councils that dealt with these things more regularly, I'm sure it would be familiar to you. But all I'm proposing here is that we get a room that the developer would build and give to us for free, as is normally done when we use the word dedicated, so that we can use it for a community use that we know we need, as well as affordable housing that we say we care about. And that's why we're doing this, because otherwise we're just building, mansions in the sky. But I perfectly understand the discomfort that I hear in providing any, let's call it, additional public benefit on the site.
That's being the end of debate. I put the amendment. All those in favour? Against? That is lost. Councillor Lane, you have another amendment.
Thank you. It's going to take me a while to read this one out. It's quite long. So this I'm going to call the cleaning up amendment. It's called supplementary work. So our current motion is super deficient, but this is trying to, again, just knock off some more corners. So bear with me. So add new clauses. The first one is council is to undertake the following studies and report back to council within 6 months. A, as part of the general DCP review already underway, 1, adopt lower parking rates in Gladesville Town Centre and LMR areas to minimise additional traffic congestion, having regard for the studies and recommendations undertaken for this planning proposal. So that's to deal with the queues of over 1 kilometre long from our very high parking rates. Sorry, I won't talk to the motion. 2, extending design excellence requirements for the key site to all buildings of a certain size or type, e.g. apartment blocks in the LMR reform areas or buildings over 3 stories. B, the potential for a residential parking scheme within 100 metres of the key site to reduce the spillover effects of parking as recommended in the studies undertaken for this planning proposal. C, public domain improvements as recommended by SCP, that was a consultant, page 12, particularly 1, converting Massey Lane to a shared zone, and 2, safe crossing facilities on Cowell Street. And then another clause which says council is to investigate and amend under the delegation granted in item 5 of the motion, the development control plan 2. And these are just a few amendments of the development control plan. 1, in 3.1.2 South Gladesville Precinct Green Gateway, recognise that the existing neighbourhood centre on Victoria Road between Manning Street and Sunnyside Street, which is over 500 metres from the main centre, has its own role in supporting residential growth and walkability. In figure 5, in 4.1, provide active frontage corners on Hillcrest Street and Junction Street in recognition of both the existing active frontages and the complementary uses on the right LGA side of the street. C, in 4.2D, increase the floor-to-ceiling height of the small shop to 3.3 metres, consistent with section 4C of the Apartment Design Guide, or 3.6 metres, consistent with 4.2C. D, in 4.2.2, recognise the interfaces in the current residential heights permitted by the LFR reforms, with words to the effect of A, a deep soil setback of 3 metres, and B, a setback of 12 metres above the permitted building height of that residential zone in accordance with the LEP or Chapter 6 of the Housing SEP, whichever is higher, and amend clause 6.1.5 secondary setbacks to be consistent with this, noting this is currently inconsistent with the current 4.2.2. E, consider whether or not section 4, particularly 4.2.3, meets the deep soil requirements and tree canopy requirements of D5, particularly the minimum 3 metres connected to 6 metres deep contiguous deep soil and 15% deep soil area, plus a requirement to plant 1 medium tree per 300 square metres of site area in the urban tree canopy targets and development control reports by Gallagher Studio and Studio Zanato from 2021. D, exclude solid facades in 4.3J from shop fronts and insert a new clause to address shop fronts to avoid inconsistency with 4.1. In doing so, consider whether 4.3M word shop fronts should read facades. E, amend 5.2C to distinguish between through-site links and through-site open to the sky. Through-site links open to the sky are typically 6 metres wide. The narrowest is Scotch Row in Barangaroo, which is 5 metres wide. Through-site building links typically have a height requirement of 2 stories or 1.5% the width, or 6 metres. Cross-referencing with 6.1.8 would also assist this clause. F, amend 5.4 requiring paving treatments to include vehicle crossovers consistent with the Design of Roads and Streets Manual. G, amend 6.1.7 open street network to require a minimum width of the key open space areas to avoid the unintended outcomes like a 6 metre wide open space shared zone being delivered on Massey Street. H, amend 6.1.6 to provide guidance on the depth of active use and the proportion of retail and non-retail use at surface level under 6.1.9, noting, for example, that the canopy development specified a minimum of 925 square metres of surface area retail for this purpose. And I, amend 6.1.15 overshadowing of Gladesville Hub Public School to consider activities from 7 a.m. as per Ryde Council's submission.
Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Lane, do you wish to speak to your
I would love
amendments?
So there are many flaws in the document, and there are also flaws in the way that we've called this a master plan but concentrated on the key site. And the key flaw, the first key flaw, is that we have seen that our own traffic studies have shown unacceptable traffic impacts in this area. The 1.1 kilometre queue should be a massive red light for everyone here. And what we should have gone back and done is considered holistically what our car parking standards are. And so this, since we have a general DCP review already underway, just requires us to do that job. The second one is we've proposed design excellence here, and I've got to say thank you to the staff for taking on one improvement to the pre-exhibition document. But really, this is only one building among many buildings in Gladesville Town Centre and many buildings in the LMR area. And so really, if we're thinking about design excellence, we should be thinking about it for our areas, not just for one building. The second one is, and I think one of the speakers touched on this, is that one of the key things that is going to happen is there's going to be spillover parking in and around the site as a result of the development, and they recommended that we therefore develop a residential parking scheme. But again, the planning proposal doesn't actually do anything with that, so this asks council to look at a residential parking scheme to deal with spillover parking. Then they also made recommendations for minimum public domain improvement. So again, Massey Lane is considered a major issue in the studies, and the only comment that council makes in the report is that's outside the scope of this planning proposal, but that doesn't stop council from actually addressing the issue of Massey Lane. It also flags safe crossing facilities on Massey and Cow, so I've included Cow. And then there's just the things that the development control plan doesn't do particularly well, which I'm just, again, trying to knock off the corners of since we're apparently approving this at the same time. So the first one is we flagged that South Gladesville Precinct is a green gateway, but it's not. It's currently a bunch of shops and houses. There is a bit of a green gateway near the police station, but we've gone and made it multiple blocks long. So this tries to recognise what's currently there. Again, if we don't recognise that there is another neighbourhood centre, we will drive even more driving in Gladesville. You know, there's a precinct. We should be thinking about walkability from all parts of the precinct, not just the key site. On the active frontage corners, again, just recognising that there are some shops and active frontage we haven't captured, and so the diagram is wrong. Should be improved. The floor to ceiling height that's currently proposed for small shops is 2.7 metres. This is like ridiculously inadequate. This has been proven over and over again. It's basically a residential floor to ceiling height being proposed for small shops. It's also not consistent with the apartment design guide, so it couldn't be delivered in the buildings anyway. So I just recommend we go for the minimum in that. Then in relation to the LMR reforms, and I asked this as a question to the speaker that's now left, at the moment, we have a very large setback on the eastern side above the second story, and we've done that because back in 2021, we were responding to the existing two-story character That has since become a 6-story character, and multiple times, including in February, I raised this with the staff, but they didn't make any changes. And as a result of that, we have pushed the buildings closer to Gladesville. We don't need to because the character has changed, and this just looks to reflect what we already know. What else? We haven't got any requirements for trees. Our requirement for deep soil doesn't meet the minimum, which means that those trees will probably die. And I'm just suggesting that if we wanted trees and green streets, we should reflect the advice that's been given to government already. We have a clause that requires that the shop fronts be masonry. It's an error. It needs to be fixed. We have a clause that calls the facades of the buildings shop fronts. It's an error. It needs to be fixed. There's a conflation of through-site links in various clauses and widths, which implies that you can get away with 3 meters, which would be disastrous. And even if this is only a through building link, it doesn't have a height, which means it'll only be 1 story, which is a really crappy experience. And that's why every other council has a minimum height, and that just tries to fix that. The paving treatments exclude the vehicle crossovers. That's a really poor outcome that the Design of Roads and Streets doesn't talk about. So I'm just saying, let's be consistent with current best practice. The open space network, as I said, doesn't have a minimum width. So you could potentially deliver our entire DCP with no usable open space. And if you wanted evidence of that, Third Eye's scheme is an example of how you can satisfy what we're talking about and still deliver a toast rack. So we're not going to get any benefit. Like I said, there's a bit of a conflation of the different types of use between retail and non-retail, and there's a better way of doing it. And Ryde Council has again raised this issue of Gladesville Public Schools overshadowing. And I think it's interesting that we talked about this earlier, this issue of, oh, well, look, we've only done one particular massing and there could be other massings. Again, most planning outcomes, they talk about the outcome you're looking for. So you would require no more than 50% overshadowing of Gladesville Public School within certain hours. We haven't done that. I don't know why we haven't done that. We've just said 70 metres and we've done a bit of a block study and we think it's okay. So if they come up with a building that overshadows Gladesville Public School and Trim Place all through winter, we could ask them nicely through a design excellence process to fix that, but we won't be able to require them to fix that because we will have given that away. And so again, all this is trying to do is to fix the DCP so that we've got half a lever to ask them not to overshadow Gladesville Public School as a sort of a stopgap. And all of these things are asked as council to investigate or undertake investigations because I recognise that a lot of extra work has to be done because the thing is deficient. But I think if we don't do that, we are going to end up with an even poorer outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Prieston, a question or
Yes.
speaking against?
I have so many questions. Firstly, I don't think that that's enough time to digest all of those proposed amendments for the staff and the councillors. I would love to ask the director through you, Mr. Mayor. I actually don't know where to start, to be honest, but I don't know because I'm not an expert planner. I know that Councillor Lane has a background in something like this, but I do not. So when I hear all of this, this long laundry list of items that Councillor Lane would like to be included in the council's proposal, it's highly confusing to me, and I can imagine the other councillors on the floor. To your mind, Director, is the council's proposed proposal, whatever you want to call it, deficient, incorrect, and not exhibiting design excellence? And I'm putting you on the spot here, but we're all on the spot a little. Is there anything in this list that A, you would commend to the chamber this evening to adopt, and B, would not set us down a path of another decade-long battle to do something with the site at Gladesville Shopping Village?
That's a fairly broad question, Councillor. So I'll let the director respond. What I might say to Councillor Lane is there's merit in a few. I don't. It's difficult because there's so much you put in there. There are things in there that I absolutely agree with you, and it might be something that we take off site and have a discussion as a whole council about certain provisions. I agree with things like the Green Gateway, absolutely the height of shopfront ceilings, and a lot of what you're talking about here has merit, but there are a lot of things in there that I don't agree with either. And you're talking about a volume of work probably akin to the entire planning proposal again. Some of which I think should be actioned, but some of which I think limiting car parking, for example, is something I would never support on the site because I think that you're just driving the problem out into residential streets. But I think it's worth having a discussion perhaps about what reports council as a whole might seek to clarify some of these positions with the DCP. But I'll let the director or the general manager make some comments. But it's such a long list of things you put together.
I'll pass to the director, but I might just add that the motion currently that we haven't debated yet, clause 5 does provide some ability to deal with any of these issues in relation to minor changes that might be incorporated under delegated to me to sort out. So, but I'll pass over the director to anyone else have anything else.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So, like many of these things are achievable, it is reviewing the DCP, putting in some of these requirements. I think it's probably interesting from a council perspective, getting this now, like how do we normally try and get this information earlier? The DCP is not a statutory document and it is a council-owned document. And so we can put into that document whatever we feel is reasonable and achievable. And yes, we're always striving for design excellence. And so if these things get us to a point where we feel as a council, it's moving us more towards a better outcome in design and delivery of an urban renewal site, then certainly you would consider all of these. Considering all of these cumulatively at this stage, I just can't. I would have to go through one by one in the DCP, cross-check with the site. They're all very reasonable things to call for. But until we've done the detailed analysis for the site-specific requirements, the DCP applies to all of the Claysville Village area, which is from Pittwater Road all the way down. It's not just the key site. So I would need to consider it as a whole implication to the rest of the area.
Councillor Priest, Councillor Preston, supplementary.
Thank you, Sally. To be clear, the GM mentioned, I think it's item 5 in the original recommendation in the business paper, gives delegation to the GM, I think, from the top of my head. Would that allow for GM, in theory, some of these DCP amendments to be made in the event that they have legs?
DCP amendments would have to come back to council. Yes. LEP amendments, if they are minor, under the resolution in the paper. DCP is our document, so I mean we can commission and amend any of these things as we go. I again, some of them I agree with and some of them I don't agree with, but I think we need to have a broader discussion because this has obviously been sent to us at 6 o'clock and the staff haven't had the opportunity to digest a lot of what's being proposed. So,
I guess my question is there an opportunity to amend bits and bobs?
not tonight, but we are as a council able to do that to the DCP at any point.
Yeah.
Yes. Councillor Denise Lehman and then Councillor. Sorry, are you speaking, Councillor Denise Lehman?
I am.
Are you asking a question, Councillor?
I have a question and
I was going to ask
a statement. Sorry.
Councillor Lane.
Please go ahead. Sorry, Councillor Denise Lehman.
I haven't seen anything at 6. It's the first I've seen it. It sounds reasonable to me. So would you, the first one, number 9, is council to investigate. That seems fair enough. 10 actually requires amendment. Would you be happy for 10 to be changed to be council to investigate and report back to council on the following proposed amendments, and then we can consider them proper information and time?
There's a lot there, councillor. Councillor Lane, it's your amendment. I just think it's worth a more holistic conversation about. But councillor Lane, it's your amendment.
I'm fine with it. The purpose of the phrase investigate and amend under the delegation was to allow flexibility for the staff to adopt what they needed to adopt, but we can improve the language. And if you would like to see what that looks like, then we can bring it back instead. I was just going to let Nick make the call, but we don't have to do that.
What do you mean?
So the options are amend and so investigate and report back to council on the proposed amendments.
Yep.
Or investigate and if a determined appropriate amend, the way it reads now.
Oh yeah, we can add the words and if appropriate amend. I have no problem with that.
Up to you which option, either bring it all back so we can all look at it and understand where it's going, or just leave it up to council.
While it's a laundry list, I think they are generally speaking housekeeping, and so I would be happy with Nick making the call if you are happy with Nick making the call.
Fine.
So then you just,
Okay.
I'm confident the staff are well capable to make those calls.
Yeah, so if determined appropriate.
Yeah, that's fine.
I do question, and I'm curious about the general manager's response. Within 6 months for everything is quite a lot of time and probably many hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of consultants.
I believe the DCP comes back in 6 months anyway.
Yeah, but the full DCP, that's the full DCP for all of Hunters Hill, not for Gladesville.
Yes.
Yes.
So this would just be putting a general time limit around what's already happening. That was
and you're happy for the general manager in this motion to make a determination of which of these to pursue and which
in relation to what is
surplus to
I don't know if
requirement.
it's actually 10, but what is shown as 10, yes.
Yeah.
In relation to the first ones, it's just investigate and report back. So the other ones, the ones that require more investigation, like parking.
And I can, so my issue is I agree with components, but I don't think that, for example, that councils investigate lower car parking rates in the Gladesville town centre. It's not something I can support. So it's hard for me to support the amendment.
That's just to get a report.
I know, but it's hard for me to expend council resources on time on something that I think would be detrimental to the community in Gladesville, for example, in that instance.
I appreciate that, but our own studies and recommendations recommend that we do this, and we have a known issue of massive queues on Victoria Road, which are probably fatal to the planning proposal as it currently stands, I believe, but if not, would certainly be a headache for future residents if we didn't address it. So all I'm saying is let's get a report. If the report says no, everyone loves their parking, we should up it and keep at the highest parking rates in the Sydney Basin, sure. But I'm just asking for a report, since we're going through a DCP amendment, to consider what our own consultants have recommended that we do.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Councillor.
On that, to the director, I think, through you, Mr. Mayor. What would the cost be to council of undertaking, I guess, some kind of a survey in relation to 9AI and then bringing that back to council? Because I sort of tend to agree with the mayor on that. Like I would be in support, generally speaking, of delegating authority to the council staff to make these, as you say, tidy up amendments as appropriate. But I fundamentally disagree with 9AI. And so I wouldn't want council resources to be expended on something that I don't think is congruous with obtaining the best outcome.
But we spent council money on reports that made that recommendation. You understand? We have already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Thanks for mansplaining
multiple,
to me. I understand.
Multiple
I've asked a
traffic
question to the
councillors,
director.
please. I'll move back into debate. I have a conundrum because I think that some of this is worth doing. It might be that that the staff hearing the debate brings some of these to a future council if this is not, to a future council meeting if this is not successful. But there are some components of this that I think are very much worthwhile doing some, which I don't, but I'll move back into debate. Any speakers against the proposed amendment? All the proposed amendment. Councillor Tanus-Lehmann.
Well, one, I just wanted to firstly say it is a lot to digest. But I see merit in it. I think we need to debate this. I think we do need to go back and investigate all these options. I think hearing what you've said, Mayor, I take on point there's a couple of pieces that I probably would agree with, and there's a couple of pieces I want further investigation. I think that's all we're asking for, just a further report. I do support it.
Councillor Tanus, thank you. Councillors, any speakers against the motion, the amendment? Councillor
I
Kassab.
have a question.
Thank
Through you, Mr Mayor, to Councillor Lane. I just want to clarify with the parking. Sorry, I know we keep harping on about the parking, but with the parking, where is it that it suggests that we need another report? Because from what I see, my understanding is that we did get an assessment and there was a decision made. And then via our DCP and New South Wales advice, we get a traffic impact assessment. So what's the further report that you're referring to?
So in the traffic impact assessment and the peer review that was done by SCP, they recommended that on this site, we look at lower parking numbers. And that was that previous, when I had my motion 2 on parking, that was what I was trying to adopt and that failed. But separately from that, we're looking at our entire DCP. And given that we know that there are major impacts in this area, and we have received these multiple reports from traffic experts telling us that we should be adopting lower parking rates, it seems like we should do it. Now, because that would be the entire DCP, not just the key site, it's a separate investigation because you just have to do some more assessment. And I don't think we should make the call without the assessment. So I'm asking councillors, staff, can you please make that assessment and report back to us?
Okay.
Okay.
Councillors, is there any speakers for the amendment? Councillor Williams.
Against?
No, I just have one question. So this is to amend the resolution in the papers, right? So you want to add this to that?
This is to add at this point, clause 9, yes, that you add from 9 onwards.
To the
So
original
9.
recommendation.
And then we still get to talk about this one.
And then once this amendment's finished, assuming that there are no other amendments, we will talk about the principal motion, which is about the Gladesville Shopping Village and the planning proposal. Yes?
It's massive.
Including the 3 motions that I added at the beginning about Massey Street being included in the block.
Yeah.
That's where we're up to in debate. Sorry for the confusion. Councillor Williams, you have the call.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I congratulate Councillor Lane on his knowledge and ability to improve what council is trying to achieve here. And I do stress that this is only a step in the process. He's asking for reports and studies not to determine the outcome at this point in time. So to me, a lot, or all of it here, with the exception of the parking issue, it makes sense to me. And we only got the DCP today in its final form. So again, I come back to that point. What is the rush for all this? If we're only getting documentations 4 hours before the meeting's held, then the considered view of somebody that has expertise in this area, Councillor Lane, I think has merit and should be incorporated in the overall outcome as we get improvements from this. And to me, what is the rush with all this? Why can't we get it right? And thank you, Councillor Lane, for your views.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any speakers against the amendment?
Move that the motion be put.
Move that the amendment be put. Is that seconded? Seconded, Councillor Kassab. All those in favour? Against? That is, sorry, I'll do that again. All those in favour? Against? With 1 abstention.
Can we just, sorry.
Well, this is a motion that the motion be put. Sorry. There's a motion that the amendment be put, which means that we would put the amendment and move back into debate on the primary motion. Yes. So if,
It means I just don't get it right.
so all those in,
Let's go.
all those in favour? Against? That is carried. I'll now put the amendment. Those in favour? I'll do that again. All those in favour?
The
The amendment.
Oh, yes.
That's unanimous.
So much for gagging. Yeah.
Councillors, I know it's been a long debate. I know it's been a long debate and we're back to the primary motion, but please, can we pay attention? Because I do not want to have to repeat motions again and again and votes. Councillors, we are back on the primary motion. Is there any speakers against the motion? Councillor Lane, thank you. Including Councillor Lane's amended part 9. And
Yes,
now,
including the one that got up. So this is a proposal that is wrapped around a single developer owner's site. And we are belatedly including another single developer owner's site, but explicitly saying in the third, I think it's number 8, that we're not going to hold this up. So we're not even considering whether we can make a better job of the public open space now that we know that the key site is going to be a different shape. We really, really want to proceed with a single developer's outcome. Now, at the moment, there is heightened probity around council making decisions where developers are too cosy with council on PPs, and we need to show that in a proposal which is hand in glove with a single developer outcome, we are doing that job. And not only have there been a litany of issues that have been raised here that mean that we need to seriously reconsider the scheme, not the least of which is we ruled out a corner of the site that should have been within the development. But even in just trying to knock off the corners, we didn't. So we haven't considered the traffic, the enormous traffic, the 1.1 kilometres of traffic impacts. We are doing nothing to resolve in this. We have literally got a report and said, yep, there's a problem, we're not going to resolve it. So, you know, basic precautionary principle says you don't do it if you haven't mitigated the outcome. We haven't considered what the affordable bonus under the housing SEP of 30% plus the ability to then go to the HDA in approving additional development will do. But we can almost certainly guarantee that if we approve 70 metres, that a 27-storey developer scheme will be inevitable. In fact, the 27-storey developer scheme that was shown to us in the Urbis report as a submission is entirely deliverable at the moment because we haven't got the right controls on public open space, and they are able to leverage our very weak controls with no overshadowing controls or whatever to get that outcome from the state. And the thing about the state is the state does look at two things. They look at what the community thinks, and they look at what the surrounding context is. So if the surrounding context is 8 stories and a developer asks for 27 stories, they don't get it. And so that's why, we see 18 stories at a stretch going on at the hotel across the road. If we as council said that 19 stories is fine, then DeFi starts with 19 stories. And then they ask, on its merits, there are more than, 70 metres, I keep saying 19, it's not, are more than 70 metres justifiable. So we are painting ourselves into a corner. We are also not considering the lower height option that we are required to consider under our own unrescinded motion. And a lower height option is available with the FSR, and we fudge it. In fact, we make another problem because in the analysis we say there are 3 choices. We say there's do nothing, or there's adopt the current scheme, or there's adopt a lower height scheme. But the problem is, well, there's 2 problems. The one is that the do nothing scheme says that nothing will happen. And that's just wrong because a developer bought this site and they would have had to do a feasibility study in order to buy that site. Or they would have had to know that they could get a outcome from a council-led scheme that would secure them a feasible outcome that wasn't feasible, which would be corrupt. So I'm going to go with the former, which is that they bought the site on the basis that it was feasible under the old controls, and so do nothing would lead to a developer outcome, which I think we've seen exactly what that looks like in the submissions. The go ahead with this scheme option is also not available to us because we reduced the site area by 26% and we changed the feasibility by $10 million. So all of our supporting studies are now wrong, and we did nothing to adjust our expectations in terms of outcomes, affordable housing, public benefit and waiver. So we are asking to go ahead on a site that is 26% smaller without checking the massing, without checking the public benefit, without checking even if the public open space works, but we're still going to go ahead with it. And then I gave you a laundry list that we're now going to look at of minor amendments in the DCP, but then there are the larger ones like the parking that we're not going to do. We haven't looked at the changes to the development margin from, by my calculation, somewhere between 9.5% at the moment to 11.4% if they adopt ADG rates and no longer have to acquire the $15 million worth of land that our own, of the $90 million of land costs, $15 million were attributed by Hill PDA to acquiring the sites they no longer have to acquire on Gladesville Road, but we haven't taken that into account. They also estimated basement parking at $75,000 a space, so that's another $15 million that we have not regarded by not looking at parking. Both Urbis on page 1022 and Colliers on page 1049 noted that the open space cannot meet the DCP solar access requirements. They said that was an internal inconsistency, which we haven't resolved. 82% of people objected and the supporters objected on height, but we didn't do the testing, and therefore we don't actually know whether or not there is a scheme at 15 stories. The post-exhibition report contains statements like towers, opportunity for more slender buildings, etc. But as I pointed out, we didn't actually put that in the requirements in section 611. And again, that was voted down. So we don't have a leg to stand on in terms of slender towers. And as Councillor Williams pointed out, in any case, the way that the towers line up, they just form a continuous shadow, which will be worse now that they've rotated the building to face north. So we are going to get this huge sweeping shadow across Gladesville and onto Trim Park. And anyway, and then there are the little problems, like the fact that the height of buildings diagram usually circumscribes tower locations, but we haven't done that work. The fact that we said that we were basing this on Lane Cove, but in actual fact, when you look at Lane Cove, 1,500 square metres is access ways, and actually they have an 1,800 square metre park, and they have two 800 square metre areas. One is a lovely stage and some back of house that no one uses because it's hard to get to except for the little track, and then another 800 square metres of hard space where they currently have a pickleball court. So if it's like for like comparison, it's roughly 3,000 square metres. We're asking for an extra 1,000 square metres on top of that, and that's one of the reasons why it's not working as a scheme. We noted the affordability bonus, but we didn't actually test it in our feasibility. We mentioned that community facilities would be a future investigation, but we actually already have the social needs study that tells us that we need to have community facilities. So it isn't a matter for future investigation because we did those investigations a couple of months ago. There isn't actually any requirement for retail at ground level to activate the plaza because although we've defined active edges, we haven't defined the depth of that retail, and we haven't defined whether or not it's retail or non-retail because the DCP fudges the two. So you could just end up with a bunch of, gyms and display units. The Bitsios study on page 128 mentioned that the intersection model was within acceptable performance parameters, but that's not true because the Cal Street intersection has a level of service E and a 1.1 kilometre Q. And so that report is internally defective because it tells us we don't have a traffic issue when we do. They also acknowledged that the Massey Street footpath was too narrow, but it was out of scope. And Ryde Council then said that we needed to do something about that, but we haven't. They proposed the widening of Flagstaff Street, but that was also not in scope and therefore not in this report. They also modelled all the LMR traffic, but we don't do anything to mitigate that or understand that whether or not that's true or the volume that, the extent. There's so many issues with the parking. I don't know if I should go into it. Impact on surrounds. Ryde flagged that there were missing heritage items that we hadn't considered, and we haven't done that. The solar access to Gladesville Public Schools, I said from 7 a.m. is an issue that Right Council flagged. We have addressed the fact that there is 30% solar access from 9:30, which means that the entire school period in midwinter is going to be in shadow. We've heard from the school. We've also now heard from the council that both of those are unacceptable. We haven't done any overshadowing protection. We haven't minimised trip generation and overspill. We've done nothing about overspill. We haven't considered library facilities. We also mix up privately operated public space, or POPs, although we call it publicly accessible public space, which is weird, and public open space throughout this. And this is really important because when you claim a public benefit, it's got to be public. So we do say in the DCP that public open space is the benefit that we're going to deliver, but then we allow the developer to deliver non-public space, and that benefit doesn't have the same weight in terms of what we're actually delivering. And in fact, it doesn't meet the objectives as drafted of the DCP, which requires public open space. But anyway, they'll fudge that because it's only guidance. And then, there's all those drafting issues with the DCP as well. And so fundamentally, I guess where this gets to is the point that Councillor Williams was making, which is it's not ready. We're rushing. There's no apparent reason why we're rushing, but it's clearly too early for us to be doing that. And if we were to do it, we are going to get an outcome which is worse than it could be, which is deficient. And that goes back to that first part that I started about, which is heightened probity needed. Because if we're approving something and we're not taking into account all of these flaws, and ICAC is currently investigating why are people who are friends with developers pushing development outcomes that are not in the public interest, I think we are exposing ourselves to that same criticism and investigation, which is that we would be approving something that is deficient. Not because it has to happen now, but because we are trying to rush it through. And the laundry list of amendments that I made that were adopted, which was great, I was going to say the reason why I had to do them as a laundry list is not only did we receive the DCP today, but the first and only workshop we were going to have on this was cancelled. So even though this has ostensibly been in the works for ages.
Sorry, Councillor Lane, I'll clarify that was cancelled by ministerial directive, not by the council staff or myself.
No, there was a choice, and the choice was you either postpone this meeting to allow us to discuss the DCP, or you
Sorry, could I get the General Manager to clarify?
The Minister, Ed, put out new regulations that says you weren't able to have workshops on anything coming up to council in the near future. So we couldn't have had the workshop. Councillor Lane, I'm sorry.
And Councillor Williams pointed out that you could have just broadcasted it.
Yes, if you broadcast it, it's possible.
And we weren't ready to do that.
Councillor Lane.
Okay, so the point, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that apropos of rushing, we haven't workshopped it. So not only do we keep on seeing the same proposal that Director Karepis developed back in early 2026, and it just keeps on cycling through. And I'm looking at the fact that I said Massey Street non-compete back in February, and yet here are all the people from Massey Street saying, why haven't you considered us in, so we just haven't been doing our job for months and months and months, and we are therefore railroading an outcome. And I would love to see from Councillor Vergara, as you were suggesting, that we actually vote this down and say it's not ready. But fundamentally, I can't support it at the moment because even with the laundry list of amendments, it's still not ready. And so I would commend the council to give a little bit more time to actually resolving the issues that are in front of them.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Speaking for the motion, Councillor
I just have a
Priest.
quick question
Yes.
about one thing that Councillor Lane mentioned through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director. Retail versus non-retail. I know that the planning proposal includes specifics, e.g. A new supermarket with associated retail services, and among other things. So I just want to make sure that in its current form, we can have certainty that there is specific types of retail going into any planned development, or is it
Well,
just
sorry,
retail
okay.
or?
So the requirement under this motion and the paper that
Yeah.
surrounds it is that there is a floor threshold for the retail that needs to be provided.
Yep.
So you can assume with a large format retail shopping centre box is between 4,000 and 5,000 square metres, that you could fit maybe 1,000 square metres of other specialist retail in there, but I'll let the director answer.
So the previous version had a minimum requirement of 5,000 square metres with a minimum 3,500 square metres for a supermarket. And that doesn't necessarily provide flexibility. So the updated clause has a minimum requirement of 5,000 square metres of retail. That gives a little bit of flexibility for different types of supermarkets, and then also provide for retail, which can be food and beverage similar to what Councillor Lane was talking about at the canopy. So you can have that 950 square metres activated on a green square.
Okay.
But we haven't looked through what that retail mix would be, and we don't prescribe a retail mix.
That's the minimum.
Just the minimum. But to be clear, like Councillor Lane was talking about retail versus non-retail, but you're saying that we do specify a retail.
A minimum requirement for retail.
Yeah, okay.
Councillor Lane, Councillor Preston, are you speaking to the motion for or against?
Yeah, I will speak for.
You are the seconder.
Yeah, I know. I just am trying to gather all of my thoughts. I think my thoughts started in one place at the start of this meeting, and then they've morphed into other things. But I think at the heart of it for me, so if we cast our minds back to 3 hours and 16 minutes ago when we started this discussion, there was a lot of rhetoric in the chamber tonight around a compromise on public open space in favour of lower height settings on the towers, and this is a new concept. Like, I just want to make that really clear that definitely in 2021, the feedback collected by council inside the chamber and then via multiple surveys and multiple community consultation sessions was that the community had expectations on minimum open space requirements for public amenity at this site. Even an excerpt from the Gladesville Community Group website at the time says, verbatim, the requirement for open space for public amenity, such as 4,000 square metres, should be written into the planning controls. It should have been done in the 2021.
Councillor Lane, much like before when I asked you to be listened to by the other councillors, I'd allow Councillor Preston the same privilege.
2012 LEP, it should be written into the planning controls now as exhibited in the block plans. The report also points out tonight that the results of the survey in relation to the 2021 proposal indicated that more public space and open space was the most important issue. I know that's been mentioned around the table a number of times tonight as well. Now, I'm not here to nitpick and to talk about who said what, when necessarily. We could do that till the cows come home. But the issue that I see, and I've spoken about this in this chamber before tonight many times, is that there has been a 2-decade-long saga of the Gladesville shopping village, which perfectly illustrates, and Mark Lane has referred to this before, planning paralysis, which cripples urban renewal. For over 20 years, this site has been trapped in this cycle of, ambitious developer proposals and then scale backs by council and then intense community pushback and then shifting council priorities and then shifting state government priorities, increasing costs of development, you name it. Like, it's been 20 years that this site has been contemplated, and with good reason. Like, it is becoming decrepit as we have this discussion. This has resulted in complete stagnation, and our vital town centre of Gladesville is decaying. So whilst, you know, different stakeholders have different perspectives and we can argue over abstract height limits or, you know, whether or not it should be this sort of retail or that sort of retail, it's a space that I believe and many people in the community believe that fails to meet basic modern retail standards. Local businesses are deprived of a thriving modern commercial hub to anchor the neighbourhood, which forces residents like myself to travel to neighbouring council areas like Drummoyne or Lane Cove. We've spoken a lot ad nauseum, in fact, about the canopy and how good that is and how amazing the shops are there, and even that's dated now. For high quality retail, dining and lifestyle experiences. We do not offer that in our own LGA, and that is such a shame. So in my view, by constantly rejecting the trade-offs required to get the project off the ground, the community has ironically spent 2 decades deprived of the very things that it needs most. Dedicated green open spaces. I know you can get that elsewhere. You can go down to Clark's Point, you can go down to, you know, Gladesville Reserve, you can go to multiple places to get that. But I personally would love to see that integrated into a planning proposal at Gladesville Shops. A state-of-the-art, you know, library or community hub, accessible public plazas, safe pedestrian thoroughfares, and ample parking and residential housing. Let alone the fact that throughout this period of time, the state Labor government has imposed blanket housing targets on LGAs across the state, which puts pressure on the system. I agree. I don't agree with those housing targets. However, it means that, as Councillor Bergara pointed out earlier on, if the developer were to submit directly with no consultation with council, then it's likely the state government would be supportive of such an application in any case. So we're sort of damned if we do and we're damned if we don't, and we're in this pickle where if we keep letting it stay stagnant, my view is, and it's a really hard decision to come to, and Councillor Vergara articulated it earlier, it's not black and white, but for me, it's almost like we should have commenced the process, you know, 10 years ago, where the height controls were going to be far less. But now we're in this situation where something needs to be done. And how long can we sit here hearing in this chamber that nothing for the time? I think I heard the words from some of the speakers tonight, you know, it's not nothing, but it's nothing for the time being. And I personally can't hear that any longer. And I think it's been glossed over a little bit that under the current LEP, an applicant can apply to build 10 stories on the key site. There's a reason that this hasn't been done. It's not economically viable, and it leaves our community deprived of the quality amenity that it deserves. And that is my view, and that is the view of a number of members of the community. And whilst I appreciate...
Sorry, again, I reiterate, I've said this several times to not only councillors, but members of the gallery. Please respect the speakers that are speaking. I've seen it on this side with Maureen Flowers and now here. Please respect the councillors who have the call. Maureen, if you continue, I will ask you to leave. Sorry, you disrupt council quite often, and it's really, really rude. Incredibly rude person. Councillor, sorry, no, I'm not asking you to interject. I'm sorry, Maureen. Councillor Prieston, please.
Thanks. Also, council staff have dedicated a lot of time to this. Council laws have dedicated a lot of time to this over a number of years. You know, we've listened to the community, we've listened to different groups, we've listened to the planning staff, we've listened to Mark Lane, Councillor Lane's views. Everyone is involved. There is no stakeholder left untouched. There is no stone unturned. Whilst there are bits and bobs that we can do as an iterative process, whilst we go through, and the state government, I'm sure, will do the same, I have no choice in my mind but to recommend that we proceed with the planning proposal brought to us tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Prieston. Any speakers against? Or?
Have I already had that?
No, you've proposed an foreshadowed motion, so you can speak against.
Oh, Okay. I didn't.
I should have said no.
Well, you probably should have, because I did go through 30 issues, which wasn't related to the foreshadowed maintenance.
Yes.
But I don't accept the urgency of this matter. I know everybody, including myself, would love to see an outcome for this. But as we've heard tonight, and very well put by Councillor Lane, and I hope I contributed to it initially, that we're not in a position to do this. We put ourselves at risk if we go ahead with a half-baked solution or something that maybe not stand up to scrutiny. This is a planning proposal for a site-specific outcome. It is not a master plan, and I just get annoyed by seeing the confusion which is given in this documentation as to, is it a master plan? Is it a site-specific planning proposal? It is a site-specific planning proposal for an individual developer. I can't understand how council would be doing all the work for a developer, spending its money, resources, and a whole lot of time around this table, a lot of frustration in the community. I think we owe the community better. We owe them an outcome, but not this one, without further consideration. So I can't support the proposition that we must move forward tonight. We've heard the angst which is causing the community. We should respect and reflect that in our decision making. So I can't support the current recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Speakers, motion, Councillor Cassar.
Thank you. So I rise in support of the Gladesville Master Plan planning proposal as it represents years of planning, technical investigation and community consultation. This is not a proposal that has appeared overnight. It is the culmination of more than a decade of work to address the long recognised need to revitalise the Gladesville shopping village. The reality is that our community has consistently told us they want a town centre that is vibrant, attractive and functional. They want better public spaces, improved pedestrian connections, new retail opportunities and community facilities. This planning proposal seeks to deliver exactly that. Importantly, this proposal strikes a balance between renewal and public benefit. It requires... You're right.
Councillor, please stick to the Councillor Lane, please.
Councillor,
please go back to the point.
It requires open space, new pedestrian links, retail floor space and high quality urban design. These outcomes are not optional. They are built into the planning framework. I've heard concerns about density and height, and these concerns are understandable. However, the proposal before us is based on extensive economic studies. Those studies found that the earlier lower density options produced in 2021, which were up to maximum heights of 15 stories, and again in 2025 at a maximum height of 10 stories, they were simply not economically viable in today's market. Rather than allowing this centre to stagnate for another decade, this proposal provides a realistic pathway to renewal whilst protecting key public outcomes. No planning proposal is perfect, and any future development application will still undergo rigorous assessments. Detailed building design, traffic management, heritage conservation, environmental impacts and community amenity will be all considered before anything can be built. Tonight's decision is not about approving buildings. It is about deciding whether we have a clear vision for Gladesville's future. I believe this planning proposal provides that vision. It delivers renewal, investment, housing, public open space and community facilities while ensuring future development is held to a high standard. For those reasons, I commend the planning proposal to Council.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tanous-Lehmann.
Thank you.
Apologies, you waited very patiently.
That's
Yes.
right. This is the longest I've waited, and I'm okay with that. To many of the community members, I've lived here 25 years, and I know when I was campaigning a few years ago, I said I was very transparent on where I stand with development. That is, I'm very pro-development in terms of sustainable development. And I went to a lot of voters, and I told them that's where I stand, particularly being somebody who lived behind the shopping centre for the last 10 years. So, couple of things. My issue is Been a resident for 25 years. I stand here not only as a resident, but I stand here as an elected official. So I've got to make sure that I stand here to represent all views. And I'm going to say out there, anecdotally, there's been mixed feedback. Yes, I know we've had 653 submissions that have voted against it, and we've had some positive ones. But anecdotally, people do need the development. And I think we're all involved in agreement. We want this shopping centre. We want something positive in our area. I think we live in the best suburb, I still think, in all of New South Wales. And I want to make sure that people and families decide to raise their kids here and have a decent shopping centre with wonderful amenities. To that point, sorry.
No, Councillor, 1 second. I know that I've disrupted everyone tonight, I think. Can I get a motion to extend the meeting half an hour? Moved Councillor Vergara, seconded Councillor Sleeman. All those in favour? Against? That is carried. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Okay. All right. And I'm sorry, this is way past my bedtime too, but this is important. And one, I thank everyone for coming in. I'm sorry I was late, but I know this is an important topic and I don't take it lightly. But I've said always from day one since I was running as an elected councillor that I would be very supportive of a very important, major, significant piece of development. What I want to do is control the process. And what worries me that if we don't put some level of approval in place, we're out of control. And that worries me because I want to have as much control to this. I think that's the duty we have as councillors to the community. I was very comfortable because in terms of what you put through today, Councillor Lane, I found it to be an incredible piece of work in a short amount of time that you did so. And I really want to support those changes, but I can't not reject the progress of this without the risk of it going straight through as a significant project and will get approved without our input. You know, what I'm trying to do is have a happy compromise here. You know, I want us to have input to it, but I don't want us to take it into the hands of it becoming a state significant project. That's my concern, and I don't know if we can work out a happy medium where we get some of the changes that Councillor Lane has asked in terms of reporting back to, or in the case of delegating it to the general manager to make a decision on. I don't know what is possible in terms of a compromise, you know, and I'm probably taking it out to Councillor Lane in terms of, I know you want to reject it, but we're all trying to put a happy compromise here in terms of an outcome that we want to be having some control. If we let this, if it doesn't get through, this will get through in one shape, but all the changes you suggested will be lost. And that worries me. And I don't know if we can come up with a compromise. So it's more a statement or a question to you, Councillor Lane.
Probably more of a statement, Councillor.
Sorry,
Sorry, councillors. Any speakers for the motion? Or against the motion? You've already spoken against the motion, Councillor. For the motion?
To answer the question.
What was the question, Councillor? Councillor Tanushli, have you got a question for Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think unambiguously what we heard from the community was that they're concerned about height and parking. And notwithstanding that I think it needs more work and should be deferred for a month or two, I put forward 2 motions to address height and parking as a sort of a do minimum. I think that this isn't the realm of hypotheticals. We can make these changes, or we could defer to the next meeting after some investigations are done if we think that's required, this decision. That's normal. If a council has questions, they defer motions. So I would suggest that if you're not comfortable, that the appropriate vehicle would be to defer so that we can make ourselves comfortable. I don't think anything hinges on us approving it today. And I think that if you have concerns, you should be able to address those concerns before you approve it.
Councillor Williams.
Just for clarity, there is a foreshadowed motion on the table if this motion is lost. And does that move the issue forward?
If this motion, sorry, Councillor, if this motion is lost, your foreshadowed motion becomes the motion on the floor.
Right, which is not a do nothing exercise. It is to progress the thing in a more respectful way. So
With amendments in controls.
yes,
Yes, yes.
so it's not as was indicated, I'm not advocating in the foreshadow motion of doing nothing. I'm advocating moving the issue forward in a
Okay,
different way.
clarify. Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry.
Sleeman.
Mayor, can I ask the foreshadow motion? Can I see what the foreshadow motion was?
It was circulated before. If this motion fails, that motion will become the motion on the floor. Councillors, any speakers against the motion? For the motion? If not, I'll have a right of reply. This has been a very long process. I think I've dealt with this pretty much since my first council meeting in 2011, where the Cow Street, the 10 Cow Street site was sold to the then developer or then shopping centre owner. It has been a bit of a roller coaster ride. We've had applications from multiple developers varying from 16, 14, 16, 26 stories throughout the life of this application. In 2019, because of that malaise, Councillors Williams and I put a motion forward to enact these studies. Things may have changed from then until now, but the public had always indicated that large format public open space was key priority number one in all of the consultations that we had undertaken to that point. Better cyclability, better walkability, better access, coherence in planning between Pittwater Road and Junction Street. The DCP contemplates a broader area. The thing that worries me most is, and it's been touched on a number of times tonight, is that there is a development pathway open to developers now called the Housing Delivery Authority application. In those applications, no semblance of thought needs to be given to public benefit, and council does not need to be consulted. That has resulted in 18-storey developments with no public benefit being approved in Gladesville. There's a Sears that has been issued on the Sawmill site, the old Sawmill Hotel site. That would be a disastrous outcome for this community. What this application does, and what council taking the initiative to lodge a planning proposal has done, is cement in our planning law the things that the community wanted the developer to have to produce as part of the development. Some questions have been raised about, we've not been specific enough in our planning proposal. Planning proposals are not specific things. I don't think any developer worth their salt would look to overshadow a school or trim place when it's been demonstrated by council officers that you can achieve a non-shadowing effect. So there's been some vast generalities that have been passed around the council table tonight, saying that things aren't specific enough and they're making specific assumptions about what the developer would do, which I think are wrong. We need to wait for an application to, sorry, Councillor Lane, that wasn't a invitation to interrupt. We need to put good planning principles in place based on the process that was adopted in 2019 by council, that has been fought for and worked on from then until now. That has included a master planning process, that has included several iterations of public consultations, many public meetings. It has included this planning proposal and the specific DCP provisions that we've now put in place for the entire precinct. It's not going to be perfect for everyone. We have had to compromise on height to get those public benefits into the development, but they're in there. And they won't be in there if a developer can lead a planning proposal through the state government pathway. We're seeing it all throughout Sydney at the moment. This cements into our planning law the things that we want to see as public outcomes. It's not everything, but it's a lot of the stuff that we've been speaking about for a decade. I've been on this journey and on this road for a long time. The Cow Street properties were not included at the time, and I disagreed with that, and that's why I'd like to remedy it with the motion that we put forward tonight, because they thought that those properties would be too disparate and not able to be combined into one coherent site. The owners in that block, and hats off to them, have gotten together to try and advocate for a better planning outcome for all of Gladesville. So I think that it's absolutely appropriate that all of those provisions go into the planning proposal for council to allow you all to benefit from the types of uplift that you're seeing within the precinct, number one, but two, better outcomes in terms of design, potentially height, potentially massing, potentially setbacks. So I think that that is a really good outcome out of the motion that's being proposed tonight. To the council staff that have put an enormous amount of effort into this process and iteratively have been involved in a lot of cases over, decades of, quite frankly, failed attempts to plan Gladesville in a coherent way. These guys have put an enormous amount of work in, the General Manager has as well, to get this to where it is today. We wanted to get it to the last council meeting. There were some technical reports that we couldn't get to. So this is why we called an extraordinary meeting. Also understanding that there's significant public interest in the item, I think it warranted its own meeting because we knew that there'd be significant people wanting to contribute. Gladesville's needed an upgrade for a very long time. I've lived here for longer than Councillor Tanous-Sleeman. That's always been a difficult centre. And what we're going to see here is a full format shopping centre that means that residents don't need to go to Rhodes, don't need to go to Top Ryde, don't need to go to Drummoyne, don't need to go to the Canopy to do their big shop. It means that there is public, accessible open space, play spaces, better solar access into those public domains than exists already. You've got adequate and ample parking for the residents and for the retail specialty shops that are going to the precinct. It's the sort of thing that council wants to encourage so that we can go out somewhere locally to eat without having to cross a bridge. This has been a really long journey and there are some magnificent public outcomes that will come out of this. The next iteration of this, if this motion is to pass, is to work with the developer to make sure that those public outcomes are adhered to and that the benefits that we get out of this as a community are things that will last and stand the test of time within that precinct. As a resident of Gladesville, I hear the concerns about what the cumulative impact could be. But again, this process has been well thought out for a long time to the point where, yes, there are ancillary issues that we're going to have to consider. That's why I supported Councillor Lane's amendments. But they're not the primary piece in the puzzle of what happens in the built form of Gladesville. There is a broader master plan and that needs to be given effect to as well. That's not tonight's process. This is a site-specific planning proposal, some of which councils do all throughout Sydney. St Leonard's, the new play spaces and the carriageway and public open space and library over the top of the rail line was a council-led planning proposal. They drew a line in the sand. They said, these are the things that we want. These are the things that the community need and that have been engaged on. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we have done in this process. And absent the council taking up the torch and doing this, none of those things would be achieved. The developer could come in, mass to the edges, and there'd be no public domain potentially. There could be a sunk retail shopping centre and more height. We don't know. When we started this discussion, it was a 10 to 12 story development in 2011. The world's moved on. If we defer this again, which we always tend to do in Hunters Hill, I've done 4 of them in my 14 odd years in the chamber. The next time that a developer comes here proposing a development, it will be 26 stories or 30 stories. I think it's time to actually close the lid on what we want to develop in Gladesville as a community and as council and actually deliver good public outcomes within the framework that the council officers have set. That being said, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That is carried on my casting vote. That is the end of the business being considered tonight, councillors. I close the meeting at 9:43 p.m.